Hey, I'm really glad you found your way here. This channel is still new, and every single listener means more to me than I can explain. Your support is what allows me to keep sharing the stories I genuinely love. This video was made to help you slow down, relax, and fall asleep comfortably. No rush, no pressure, just a quiet place to rest your mind. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it truly feels right to you. I also love knowing where the night has carried you from. So leave a comment with where you're listening from and the time it is for you right now. It's a small thing, but it makes this feel less lonely and more connected. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the world fade out for a while. Let's drift into tonight's stories together. Story 1. The Tenant at 1847, Millbrook Road. I should have known something was wrong when the landlord wouldn't meet me at the property. The ad on Craigslist had been straightforward enough. Room for rent, $300 a month, utilities included. Quiet neighborhood, must be comfortable with older homes. I'd been sleeping in my car for 2 weeks after my roommate situation fell apart. So when I called the number listed, I didn't ask many questions. The voice on the other end was an older woman, Mrs. Cheney, and she sounded kind enough. She said the house had been in her family for generations, but she lived across town now and just needed someone to occupy the space. Keep the pipes from freezing, she said. Keep an eye on things. The key will be under the 3rd flower pot on the porch, she told me. You can move in tonight if you'd like. First month is free if you stay through winter. Free rent. I should have known. The house sat at the end of Millbrook Road, where the pavement gave way to gravel and the streetlight stopped reaching. It was a Victorian-style structure, 3 stories tall, with a tower room on the northeast corner that gave it an almost Gothic silhouette against the October sky. The paint was peeling in long strips, revealing older layers underneath. White, then yellow, then a sickly green. Most of the windows on the upper floors were dark, but I could see curtains moving in a few of them, probably from the wind coming through broken seals. I found the key exactly where Mrs. Cheney said it would be. It was old, made of brass that had tarnished to almost black, and it felt heavier than a key should feel. The lock resisted at first, then gave way with a click that echoed through the empty porch. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the door. It wasn't quite rot, but something adjacent to it. The smell of a place that had been closed up for too long, where the air had gone stale and thick. I fumbled for a light switch and found one just inside the entrance. The chandelier above me flickered to life, casting uneven light across a foyer that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1950. The wallpaper was a pattern of faded roses peeling at the seams. The hardwood floor was scuffed and dull, and there were rectangles of darker wood where furniture had once stood. A staircase curved up to the right, disappearing into shadow. To the left was a doorway leading to what looked like a sitting room, and straight ahead was a narrow hallway extending toward the back of the house. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the space. Mrs. Cheney had said the house was empty, but I needed to be sure. The silence that followed was absolute. I brought in my 2 duffel bags from the car and locked the door behind me. Mrs. Cheney had texted me earlier with instructions. My room was on the second floor, third door on the right. The kitchen was functional. The bathroom worked. Stay out of the basement and the tower room. Both were structurally unsound. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step announcing my presence to the empty house. The second-floor hallway was long and lined with doors, all of them closed, except for one at the far end, which stood slightly ajar. I counted doors as I walked, 1, 2, 3 on the right. My room. I pushed the door open and reached for the light switch. The overhead bulb was dim, but it was enough to see that the room was small and simply furnished. A twin bed with a bare mattress, a wooden dresser with a cracked mirror, and a single window that looked out over the backyard. The wallpaper here was different, a pattern of small blue flowers that might have been cheerful once, but now just looked faded and sad. I dropped my bags on the floor and sat on the bed. The springs groaned. Through the window, I could see the backyard stretching into darkness, and beyond that, a line of trees that seemed to go on forever. No neighboring houses, no lights, except for the weak glow from my room. I should have felt relieved to have a roof over my head, but instead I felt a creeping unease that I couldn't quite name. The house was too quiet, too still. It felt less like a home and more like something holding its breath. That first night, I didn't hear anything unusual. I set up my sleeping bag on the mattress. I'd buy sheets later, and lay in the darkness, listening to the ordinary sounds of an old house. The ticking of cooling pipes, the settling of floorboards, the wind pushing against the windows. I told myself that this was fine, that $300 a month in this neighborhood was a steal, even if the house was old and creepy. I'd been in worse situations. I almost believed it. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of birds outside. In the daylight, the house seemed less ominous, just old and neglected. I explored a bit more thoroughly, finding the kitchen at the back of the first floor, a cramped space with appliances from the 1970s that somehow still worked, and a bathroom on the second floor that had rust stains in the tub, but functional plumbing. I kept away from the basement door, which was in the kitchen and had been nailed shut with 2x4s, and I didn't venture up to the third floor where the tower room was. Mrs. Cheney had left some basic supplies in the kitchen: coffee, bread, peanut butter. There was a note on the counter in spidery handwriting. "Welcome. Please call if you need anything. The fuse box is in the hallway closet if the power goes out. Don't go into the basement. MC." I made coffee in a percolator that looked like it belonged in a museum and sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the overgrown backyard. I should have felt better in the daylight, but the unease from the night before hadn't entirely lifted. Something about the house felt wrong, like walking into a room right after an argument has ended. You can't see what happened, but you can feel the residue of it in the air. I spent the day job hunting online and trying to make my room more livable. I bought sheets at a thrift store along with a lamp and some towels. When I returned to the house in the late afternoon, I noticed for the first time that there were scratches on the inside of my bedroom door, long, deep gouges in the wood like something had been trying to get out or in. That night, I heard the first sound. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke to the noise. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, a rhythmic thumping, like someone walking heavily on the floor above me. But as I lay there in the darkness, the sound continued, steady and deliberate. Step, 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 moving from one end of the third floor to the other. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps, and they were definitely footsteps, reached the end of the hallway above me, paused, and then started back the other way. Step, step, step. The same measured pace. The same route. My rational mind offered explanations. Old houses settle, pipes expand and contract. Animals get into attics. But these sounds were too regular, too purposeful. They sounded exactly like someone pacing back and forth above my head. After 10 minutes, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound to start again. It didn't. In the morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress and exhaustion could do strange things to perception. I'd been sleeping in my car for weeks. Of course, my first night in a real bed would be restless. I didn't think about the footsteps as I made breakfast. I didn't think about them as I sent out job applications. But that night, they came again. 2 a.m., almost to the minute, the same pacing, the same route, step, step, step. From one end of the third floor to the other and back again. This time, I got out of bed. I opened my door slowly, careful to keep it from creaking, and looked down the dark hallway. The footsteps continued above me, and now I could hear something else beneath them. A dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. The sounds moved directly over my head, then continued down the hallway above me toward the front of the house. I thought about going upstairs. I even put my hand on the banister, but something stopped me. An instinct, a whisper of self-preservation that said, investigating strange noises in a creepy old house at 2 a.m. was exactly how people got hurt in situations like this. Instead, I went back to my room, closed the door, and put in earbuds. I played white noise until the battery died, and then I just lay there listening to the pacing above me until it finally stopped around 4 a.m. The next morning, I called Mrs. Cheney. "Is anyone else living in this house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "No, dear, it's just you. Why do you ask?" "I've been hearing noises at night. Footsteps on the third floor." Another pause, longer this time. "Old houses make all sorts of sounds, especially in the fall when the temperature changes. The wood expands and contracts. It can sound just like footsteps." "This sounds exactly like footsteps, like someone walking back and forth." "I assure you, there's no one else in the house." Her voice had taken on a sharp edge. "Are you having second thoughts about the rental?" I should have said yes. I should have told her I'd be out by the weekend. But I thought about my empty bank account, about sleeping in my car again, about the coming winter. "No," I heard myself say. "I'm sure you're right. Old houses. I'll get used to it." "Good. I'm glad we have an understanding." She hung up before I could say anything else. I spent that day researching the house. The internet connection was spotty. The router was ancient and kept dropping signal, but I managed to find some information. 1847. Millbrook Road had been built in 1891 by a doctor named Edmund Fairfax. He'd lived there with his wife and 3 children until 1904, when there had been some kind of tragedy. The records were vague, but I found a newspaper article from that year with the headline, prominent physician's family dies in mysterious circumstances. The article itself was behind a paywall I couldn't afford to bypass, but the preview text mentioned unexplained deaths and an investigation closed without conclusion. After 1904, the house had changed hands multiple times, never staying with one family for more than a few years. Mrs. Cheney's family had owned it since the 1950s, but according to county records, no one had actually lived in it since 1987. I should have left right then. I should have packed my bags and found somewhere else to go. But where? The women's shelter was full. I had no friends in the city. My family had made it clear I wasn't welcome back home. So I stayed, telling myself that footsteps weren't the worst thing that could happen. At least I had a roof over my head. At least I was warm. That night, the footsteps came again at 2 a.m. But this time, they were accompanied by something new. A sound like fingernails scraping against wood coming from inside the walls of my room. Slow, deliberate scraping as if something were trying to claw its way through the plaster. I turned on every light in my room and sat on the bed with my back against the wall, watching the door. The scraping continued for nearly an hour, moving around the room, first near the window, then by the closet, then right above my head. The footsteps upstairs kept their steady rhythm, pacing back and forth, back and forth. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because I woke to morning sunlight and silence. When I examined the walls, I found fresh scratches in the paint near the ceiling, long gouges that definitely hadn't been there the day before. I stopped sleeping at night. Instead, I napped during the day when the house was quiet, and I spent the nighttime hours sitting in my room with all the lights on, my laptop playing videos or music, anything to cover the sounds. The footsteps came every night like clockwork. The scraping in the walls grew more aggressive, and I started noticing other things. Doors that I'd left open would be closed when I came back upstairs. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly, my breath fogging in the air, even though it was warm everywhere else. I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow passing across a doorway, a curtain swaying in a room where all the windows were closed. Once, I came downstairs to find all the kitchen cabinets standing open, their contents rearranged in neat rows on the counter. I called Mrs. Cheney again and told her I was hearing and seeing things that couldn't be explained by an old house settling. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed. "I had hoped you wouldn't notice," she said quietly. "Notice what?" "The house has a history. You've done your research, I assume. The Fairfax family. What happened to them?" Dr. Fairfax conducted experiments, medical experiments, in the tower room in the basement. Not all of his patients were willing participants. When his wife discovered what he was doing, she confronted him. There was an altercation. The children were caught in the middle. She paused. Everyone in the house died that night except for Dr. Fairfax. He lived long enough to nail the basement door shut and seal the tower room before succumbing to his injuries in the foyer. I felt cold all over. You knew the house was haunted, and you rented it to me anyway. I needed someone to stay there. The house can't be left empty. Things are worse when it's empty. What things? The house remembers what happened in it. It holds on to that pain, that violence. When someone lives there, it focuses on them. It's contained. When the house is empty, the activity spreads to the neighboring properties. People started complaining. I had no choice. "So you used me as bait?" My voice was shaking. "You lured me here to take the heat so your neighbors wouldn't complain?" "I'm offering you free rent. I gave you fair warning. I told you to stay out of certain rooms. If you follow the rules, you'll be fine. Previous tenants have managed." "How many previous tenants?" She didn't answer right away. "Just follow the rules. Don't go into the basement. Don't go into the tower room. Don't engage with anything you see or hear. The house can't hurt you if you don't give it permission." "That's insane." "Perhaps. But you don't have anywhere else to go, do you?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "Stay until spring. By then you'll have saved enough money to find something else. Just 6 months. You can endure 6 months." She hung up before I could respond. I should have left that very moment. I should have gotten in my car and driven away, slept in parking lots, figured something out. But she was right. I had nowhere to go. And some part of me, the part that had learned to endure bad situations because the alternative was always worse, started rationalizing. It was just sounds, just shadows and cold spots and rearranged objects. Creepy, yes, but I'd dealt with worse. I'd lived with an abusive boyfriend who put me in the hospital. I'd survived homelessness. I could survive a haunted house. So I stayed. The nights grew longer and the activity intensified. The footsteps upstairs became more frequent, sometimes pacing for hours without stopping. The scraping in the walls happened every night now, sometimes so loud and aggressive that I worried the walls would split open. Objects in my room would move when I wasn't looking. My phone would be on the dresser when I knew I'd left it on the bed. My clothes would be pulled out of my duffel bag and folded neatly on the floor. I started finding things, small things at first. Old buttons, rusted nails, fragments of glass. They'd appear on my windowsill, arranged in patterns I couldn't decipher. Then I found a child's doll under my bed, its porcelain face cracked and one eye missing. I threw it in the trash, but the next morning it was back under my bed, in the exact same position. The worst part was the feeling of being watched. It was constant now, a prickling at the back of my neck that never went away. I could feel eyes on me when I showered, when I changed clothes, when I tried to sleep. Sometimes I'd turn around quickly, trying to catch whatever was watching me, but there was never anything there, just empty rooms and shadows and that pervasive sense of wrongness. 3 weeks into my stay, I woke in the middle of the night to find someone standing in the corner of my room. It was a woman, or the shape of a woman. She was translucent, like fog given human form, and she wore a long dress that might have been white once, but looked gray in the darkness. Her face was turned toward the wall, and her hands were raised as if she were clawing at something. As I watched, frozen in terror, she scraped her fingernails down the wall, creating the same sound I'd been hearing every night. Long, deliberate scrapes that left no marks but made my teeth ache. She didn't turn around. She just kept scraping over and over, her movements mechanical and repetitive. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. I just lay there, watching her, until she finally faded away as the first light of dawn touched the window. I spent the next day in a coffee shop, unable to be in the house. I knew I should leave, pack up and go, but the truth was I had less than $200 in my bank account and nowhere else to turn. Mrs. Cheney was right. I needed time to save money to get back on my feet. And as terrifying as the house was, it hadn't actually hurt me. It was all just phenomena, just manifestations of whatever was trapped in that place. That night, I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion won out around 1 a.m. I woke to the sound of footsteps, but they weren't coming from upstairs this time. They were coming from the hallway outside my door. Step, step, step. Slow and measured. They stopped right outside my room. I stared at the door, watching the gap at the bottom, and saw a shadow move across it, blocking out the faint light from the hallway. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, the old brass creaking. I'd locked the door. I always locked the door. But the lock was just a simple push button on the knob, and I watched in horror as it slowly turned clockwise until it clicked open. The door began to swing inward, inch by inch, revealing the dark hallway beyond. Nothing was there. The hallway was empty. But the doorknob continued to turn, and the door continued to open, and I knew with absolute certainty that something was coming into my room. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the doorway. The door stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard breathing, slow, raspy breathing that definitely wasn't mine. It was coming from the doorway, from the empty space where nothing visible stood. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking. "This is my room. Get out." The breathing stopped. The door slammed shut so hard that the whole frame shook, and I heard the lock click back into place. Then the footsteps resumed, receding down the hallway, down the stairs, until they faded into silence. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning came, I found scratches on the outside of my door, the same deep gouges that were on the inside, as if something had been trying to claw its way in after I'd told it to leave. Mrs. Cheney's words echoed in my head. "The house can't hurt you if you don't give it permission." I had told it to get out. I had engaged with it, and now it knew I could see it, hear it, sense it. The activity became more aggressive after that. Objects didn't just move anymore. They flew across rooms. I'd be sitting on my bed, and a book would sail past my head and hit the wall. The dresser drawers would slam open and shut on their own. The scratching in the walls became constant, no longer confined to nighttime. I'd hear it during the day surrounding me, like dozens of hands clawing at the plaster from the inside. The apparitions became more frequent, too. I'd see the woman in the gray dress in different parts of the house, always with her back to me, always clawing at walls or doors. Sometimes I'd see children, too, fleeting shadows that darted around corners, accompanied by the sound of footsteps too light to be adult. Once, I saw a tall figure in a dark coat standing at the end of the hallway watching me. When I blinked, he was gone. I tried to follow Mrs. Cheney's rules. I didn't go into the basement. The nailed-shut door made that impossible anyway. I didn't go up to the third floor, even though the pacing continued every night, even though I was desperately curious about the tower room. I tried not to engage, tried to ignore the phenomena, but it was getting harder and harder. A month in, I got a job at a grocery store stocking shelves on the night shift. It meant being away from the house from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which should have been a relief, but instead it filled me with dread. The house didn't like being empty. I'd come home in the morning to find furniture moved, pictures pulled off walls, my belongings scattered across every room like someone had been searching for something. One morning, I came home to find that every mirror in the house had been shattered. The bathroom mirror, the mirror in my room, even the decorative mirrors in the hallway, all broken, their glass scattered across the floor. But when I looked closer, I realized the glass had been arranged. It formed words, the fragments carefully placed to spell out, "Get out." I called Mrs. Cheney and told her I was leaving. "You can't," she said simply. "You signed a lease." There was no lease. This was an informal arrangement. "You agreed to stay until spring. We have a verbal contract." "I don't care about contracts. This place is dangerous." "It's only dangerous if you make it dangerous. You're not following the rules." "I am following the rules." "Then why is the activity increasing?" Her voice was cold now. "You must be doing something to provoke it, going where you shouldn't go, engaging when you shouldn't engage." "I haven't done anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about. Clean up the glass and continue as you were. You have nowhere else to go." She was right, and we both knew it. I hung up and spent the next hour cleaning up broken glass, trying not to look at my fractured reflection in the fragments. That night at work, I couldn't stop thinking about the house, about Mrs. Cheney's insistence that I was provoking the activity, about the tower room in the basement, the two places I was forbidden to go. What was in those rooms? What was she hiding? When I got home at dawn, I stood in the foyer and looked up the staircase. The door to the third floor was at the top of the stairs, and I'd never tried to open it. Mrs. Cheney said it led to the tower room, said it was structurally unsound, but what if that was a lie? What if the answer to everything was up there? I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding. The house was quiet around me, but it felt like it was listening, waiting to see what I would do. When I reached the third floor door, I found it locked. Not with a modern lock, but with an old padlock that looked like it had been there for decades. I went back downstairs and searched the kitchen drawers until I found a hammer. Then I returned to the third floor door and broke the padlock with 3 hard strikes. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot, and for a moment everything went absolutely still. Then the temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath. The lights flickered, and from somewhere deep in the house I heard a sound like a long, slow exhale. I pushed the door open. The staircase beyond was narrow and steep, disappearing up into darkness. The smell that wafted down was overwhelming, rot and copper, and something acrid that made my eyes water. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around, to close the door, to leave this place and never come back. But I needed to know. I needed to understand what I was living with. I turned on my phone flashlight and climbed the stairs. The tower room was smaller than I expected, circular with windows on all sides, but the windows had been painted over from the inside with something dark and thick, blocking out all natural light. My flashlight beam swept across the space, and I wished immediately that I'd listened to my instincts and stayed downstairs. The room was full of old medical equipment, an examination table, cabinets full of rusted instruments, jars containing things I didn't want to look at too closely. The walls were covered in writing, thousands of words scratched directly into the plaster. Observations, dates, descriptions of procedures. Dr. Fairfax's research notes, preserved for more than a century. But it was the corner of the room that made my stomach turn. There were shackles bolted to the wall, and below them old dark stains on the floor, and covering every surface were scratches, deep gouges in the wood and plaster, layer upon layer of them, as if someone had spent hours, days, years trying to claw their way out. I heard the breathing again right behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. The breathing grew louder, coming from all around me now, and underneath it I could hear whispers, dozens of voices all speaking at once in words I couldn't quite make out. The air in the room began to shimmer, and I saw them. Not one ghost, not two, but dozens. They appeared like photographs developing, growing more solid by the second. Men, women, children, all of them bearing the marks of violence, of suffering. They stared at me with hollow eyes, and I understood with sudden, terrible clarity that these weren't the Fairfax family. These were Dr. Fairfax's victims, the people he'd brought to this room, the ones whose deaths had gone uninvestigated and unrecorded. They moved toward me as one, their mouths opening in silent screams, their hands reaching out. I stumbled backward, dropping my phone, plunging the room into darkness except for the ghostly light emanating from the apparitions themselves. I felt cold hands grabbing at me, pulling at my clothes, my hair, my skin. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, and I could finally make out what they were saying. Join us. Stay. Don't leave us alone. Join us. I screamed and ran, shoving through the mass of bodies that felt both solid and insubstantial at the same time. I threw myself down the stairs, tripping and stumbling, feeling those cold hands still grasping at me. I made it to the second floor and slammed the door behind me, but I could hear them on the other side, scratching, moaning, trying to get through. I ran to my room and grabbed my bags, throwing in anything I could reach. I didn't care about leaving things behind. I didn't care about having nowhere to go. I had to get out of this house before it killed me, or worse, before it made me one of those tortured spirits trapped forever in this place. I was halfway down the stairs to the first floor when the lights went out, all of them simultaneously, plunging the house into absolute darkness. I froze, clutching the railing, my bags heavy on my shoulder. In the darkness, I could hear movement all around me, footsteps, breathing, the rustle of fabric, the scrape of fingernails on wood. A voice spoke in the darkness, clearer than all the others. It was a man's voice, cold and clinical. You shouldn't have opened that door. They've been waiting so long for someone to set them free. A light appeared at the top of the stairs. Not electric light, but a soft, ghostly glow. In it, I could see the figure from the hallway, the tall man in the dark coat. His face was partially obscured, but I could make out enough to see that he was smiling. "You've given them permission now," he said. "By opening that door, by acknowledging their existence, you've given them a way out. They'll follow you wherever you go now, unless what?" I asked, hating how my voice shook. "Unless you take their place. Stay here. Become the new keeper of this house. Let them move on while you remain." "You're insane." "I'm practical. Someone must stay. The house requires it. If you leave, they'll follow you, and the violence that happened in this place will follow them. They're angry, you see. They've been trapped here for so long, and now they have a chance to be free. But they don't understand freedom anymore. They only understand pain and rage. Wherever they go, suffering will follow. The ghostly light began to descend the stairs toward me, and with it came all the others. The victims from the tower room, the woman in gray, the children, all of them moving as one mass of translucent figures. They flowed down the stairs like water, surrounding me, their hands reaching out. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran for a front door, burst through it, and didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. But I managed, and I sped away from that house like all the demons of hell were chasing me. Maybe they were. That was 3 months ago. I've been living in my car again, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere longer than a few nights. 'Cause Dr. Fairfax was right about one thing. They did follow me. I see them in reflections now, in store windows, in bathroom mirrors, in the surface of my coffee. The woman in gray is always there, still clawing at nothing. The children dart between cars and parking lots. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the pacing. Step, 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 moving across the roof of my car, up and down, never stopping. I went to a priest. He tried to perform a blessing, but the temperature in his church dropped so suddenly that frost formed on the windows, and the statue of Mary began to weep. He asked me to leave. I tried sage, salt circles, every folk remedy and internet solution I could find. Nothing works. They're attached to me now, bound to me by that moment when I opened the door and saw them, when I acknowledged their existence and gave them a way out of that room. Sometimes I think about going back to the house, about accepting Dr. Fairfax's offer, taking their place so they can finally move on, but I'm too much of a coward for that. So instead, I keep driving, keep moving, trying to stay ahead of the growing crowd of spirits that follows me everywhere I go. I haven't slept in weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that tower room, surrounded by the marks of suffering, and I can hear their voices. Join us. Stay. Don't leave us alone. Last night, I saw something new in my rearview mirror. It was Dr. Fairfax, sitting in my back seat, watching me with that same cold smile. You can't run forever, he said. Eventually, you'll have to make a choice. Come back to the house, or let them turn wherever you are into the same kind of hell. The suffering has to go somewhere. It always does. I'm writing this from a rest stop somewhere in Nevada. I've been driving for 3 days straight, trying to get as far from Kansas as possible, but I know it won't matter. Distance means nothing to them. They're not bound by geography or physics. They're bound to me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if there's any way to fix this, to break whatever connection I forged when I opened that door. All I know is that I should have listened to Mrs. Cheney. I should have followed the rules, and I should never, ever have been desperate enough to rent a room at 1847 Millbrook Road. If you're reading this and you ever see an ad for cheap rent in an old house, if someone tells you to stay out of certain rooms, if something feels wrong from the very beginning, trust that feeling. Leave, because some places are haunted for a reason, and some doors are locked for a reason, and once you open them, there's no going back. The sun is setting now, and I can see them gathering in the lengthening shadows around my car, More of them each day, their numbers growing as word spreads among the dead that someone finally opened the door. Soon there will be too many to count, and I don't know what will happen when they reach critical mass. I'm so tired. Maybe tonight I'll stop fighting. Maybe tonight I'll just close my eyes and let them in. At least then it would be over. Or maybe I'll start the car again and keep driving, keep running, keep hoping that somewhere out there is a solution I haven't found yet. Keep hoping that this isn't how my story ends, alone in a car, surrounded by the angry dead, paying the price for one moment of curiosity in a house that should have been left alone. The woman in gray is standing right outside my window now, her palm pressed against the glass. She's not clawing anymore. She's just watching me, waiting. They're all waiting. I should have stayed in my car that first night. I should have driven away the moment I saw that house at the end of Millbrook Road. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you do stupid things. Now I'm paying for it. Now we're all paying for it. If you ever find yourself in Kansas and you see a woman living out of her car surrounded by shadows that don't quite match the light, that's me. Don't approach. Don't offer help. Just keep driving. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. The tunnel beneath the old factory leads somewhere that shouldn't exist. The rain was the only reason I went in. Not curiosity, not the stupid dare from Mikey at the bar, just the rain. It came down in sheets that turned the potholed parking lot of the old Black Ridge textile mill into a muddy mirror, reflecting the bruised purple twilight and the skeletal outline of the factory's broken windows. My pickup's heater had died 2 towns back, and my jacket was soaked through. The mill, the hulking brick beast that had dominated this dying Rust Belt town since 1923, was my only shelter. The chain-link fence was cut in 3 places. The main doors hung open like a dead man's jaw. I didn't think about a warning spray painted on the plywood over the lower windows. Don't go below. It remembers. I just wanted to be dry. Inside smelled of wet concrete, rust, and something else, ozone like after a lightning strike, mixed with the sweet rot stench of mildew. My headlamp beam cut through the gloom, revealing mountains of discarded machinery, looms like fossilized spiders, conveyor belts choked with dead vines, metal skeletons draped in gray cobwebs. Water dripped from the shattered skylights high above, echoing like a slow heartbeat in the vast emptiness. I found a relatively dry corner near what might have been an office, shook out my jacket, and lit a cigarette. That's when I saw the door. It was hidden behind a collapsed shelving unit, half buried under rubble, not a factory door, too small, too heavy. Solid iron riveted like a bank vault set into the concrete floor. A rusted padlock hung open on its hasp. The door itself was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond, and cold. Not just damp basement cold, a deep, marrow freezing chill that made my breath plume in the headlamp beam. It smelled like that ozone rot again, sharper now. Underneath it, wet stone, and something metallic, like old pennies. I shouldn't have opened it, but the rain hammered the roof like fists, and the cold from that crack was pulling at my bones. I heaved the door open. It didn't groan. It sighed, a wet, sucking sound, as if the darkness beyond had been holding its breath. Stairs descended into utter blackness. Concrete steps, slick with condensation. I flicked my headlamp beam down. The stairs went straight, no turns, no landings, just a narrow throat of concrete vanishing into the earth. The cold intensified, carrying that coppery smell stronger now. My teeth chattered. I took one step down, then another. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. Not a slam, a seal. The stairs went on for what felt like half an hour. The air grew thick, hard to pull into my lungs. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing, the drip of condensation from the ceiling, and the crunch of grit under my boots. Then the stairs ended. I stood in a tunnel, not a sewer, not a mine shaft. This was built. Smooth, seamless concrete walls, curving into a perfect arch overhead. No pipes, no wires, just clean, cold concrete stretching ahead and behind into darkness. My headlamp beam barely reached 20 feet before the darkness swallowed it whole. The floor was dry, spotless. I turned to go back. The stairs were gone. Where the steps should have been was only more tunnel, solid concrete wall. I ran my hands over it. No seam, no handle, no trace of the door. Panic clawed up my throat. I fumbled for my phone. Dead, waterlogged. I was alone, trapped. I had no choice but to move forward. The tunnel was silent, not just quiet. Silent. No dripping water, no skittering rats, no distant traffic hum. Just the crunch of my boots and the sound of my own pulse roaring in my ears. The air smelled sterile now, like a hospital corridor, but with that undercurrent of copper still there, faint but insistent. I walked for what felt like miles. The tunnel never curved, never branched, just straight concrete under the lid of darkness. My headlamp batteries were fading, the beam yellowing, shrinking. Shadows deepened at the edges of my vision. Then I heard it, a whisper, not from ahead, not from behind, from inside my own skull, dry, papery, like dead leaves skittering across stone. Daniel? I froze. My name, my real name, not the Danny everyone used since high school. Only my mother called me Daniel. She'd been dead 10 years. Keep walking, Daniel. It's warmer ahead. Her voice, exactly her voice. The soft lisp, the warmth that always lived in it, even when she was scolding me for tracking mud on her clean floors. But it was wrong, flat, emotionless, like a recording played through a tin can. Mom? The word cracked in my throat. Don't stop. Don't look back. The cold bites here. I walked faster. The tunnel walls seemed to press closer. The beam of my headlamp flickered, dimmed to a sickly orange glow. Shadows leapt and writhed at the edges of the light, not cast by anything, just there, coiling in the corners of my vision. The whisper came again, but it wasn't just my mother anymore. Layered beneath her voice were others. Mikey from the bar laughing about the dare. My ex-wife Sarah sighing, "You always run toward trouble, Dan." My old boss firing me, "You're not reliable, Daniel." All speaking at once, a chorus of disappointment and fear, all whispering the same thing. Keep walking. The tunnel opened suddenly. I stumbled out of the concrete throat into a vastness that stole my breath. My dying headlamp beam swept across. Nothing. Empty space, but not darkness. A pale, sourceless light filled the air, the color of bone. It revealed a landscape that shouldn't exist. No sky, no stars, just an endless vaulted ceiling of smooth, featureless stone, stretching into gloom hundreds of feet above. Below it, a city, not ruins, not overgrown, a city of perfect, bone-white structures. Towers like bleached ribs pierced the ceiling. Buildings curved into impossible spirals, their windows dark, empty eyes. Streets ran straight and silent between them, paved with the same seamless white stone. No vehicles, no wires, no smoke, no life, just geometric perfection under that lid of stone. The air hung utterly still. The coppery smell was gone. Only the sterile hospital scent remained, cold and clean. And the statues. They lined the nearest street, hundreds of them, life-sized human figures carved from the same bone-white stone, men, women, children, all facing the same direction, toward a colossal archway at the city's heart, all frozen mid-stride, all smiling, not happy smiles, rictus grins stretched too wide, splitting their stone faces. Their eyes were closed, tightly shut. I took a step forward. My boot crunched on the white gravel of the street. The sound was obscenely loud. It echoed off the silent towers. Every statue turned its head, not smoothly, not mechanically, with the slow grinding crack of stone on stone. 100 stone faces swiveled toward me. Their shut eyes didn't open. Their smiles didn't change. But I felt them looking, felt their attention like ice sliding down my spine. The whispers in my head surged, not voices now, but a dry, rustling hiss, like roots tearing through soil. "Daniel, you found us. Welcome home." I ran, not back toward a tunnel mouth. I couldn't see it anymore, but down a side street, away from the staring statues. The white city swallowed me. Buildings leaned inward, their smooth walls reflecting my frantic face back at me, distorted. The street curved, then ended at a sheer cliff, not earth, not rock. A wall of pure, rippling darkness. It didn't absorb the light. It consumed it. Where the pale glow met the darkness, the light simply ceased to exist. And standing at the edge of that nothingness, facing the void, was a single statue, taller than the others. Its back was to me. It wore no clothes carved in stone, just smooth, featureless marble from head to toe. But I knew it was waiting for me. The whispers became a roar. "Don't blink!" My mother's voice, sharp with terror. I forced my eyes wide, tears freezing on my cheeks. The tall statue began to turn. Slowly, its head rotated on its neck with a sound like boulders grinding together. It wasn't a human face, just smooth marble where a face should be. But as it turned fully toward me, 2 points of absolute darkness appeared on the blank surface, deep pits that pulled at my gaze, and below them the stone split. A smile, wider than any human mouth, rows of needle-like teeth carved from shadow. It didn't move toward me, it simply reached. Its arms stretched, elongating like taffy, crossing the 50 yards between us in a heartbeat. Stone fingers, cold as grave dirt, closed around my wrist. The touch burned with cold. My headlamp died. Darkness, but not empty darkness. The whispers filled it, not in my head now, in the air. 1,000 dry voices speaking at once, layered over the deep, slow thrum that vibrated up from the white stone beneath my feet, the pulse of the city, the pulse of the thing holding me. "You left us, Daniel?" My mother's voice sighed, close to my ear. Her breath smelled of damp soil and pennies. "You left us in the cold places, but the tunnel remembers, the stone remembers. We remember your name." I tried to pull away. The stone fingers tightened. The cold spread up my arm, numbing my shoulder, creeping toward my heart. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Look at us. See us. Remember us." The tall statue leaned closer, its shadow mouth opened wider, not to bite, to speak. The sound that came out wasn't a voice. It was the grinding of continental plates, the groan of roots tearing bedrock, the hiss of sap boiling deep in the earth, and beneath it, clear as a bell. Welcome home, Daniel. I squeezed my eyes shut, not from fear, from memory. The last thing my mother ever said to me, holding my hand in the hospital bed, her skin papery and cold, "Don't be afraid of the dark, Danny. Be afraid of the things that wait for you to close your eyes." I opened my eyes. The statue was gone. The city was gone. I stood at the edge of the cliff of darkness, alone. My wrist ached where the stone fingers had gripped me. The whispers were silent. Only the deep, slow thrum remained, the pulse of the place. Behind me, the tunnel mouth glowed faintly, a rectangle of warm yellow light. An exit. My heart leapt. I ran for it, stumbling over the white gravel. The light grew brighter. I could see the rusted iron door standing open at the top of the stairs. Rain lashed the factory floor beyond it. Freedom! I burst through the door, slamming it shut behind me. I threw the deadbolt, rusted, stiff, but it held. I collapsed against it, gasping, soaked in sweat despite the cold. The factory was dark, but the rain on the roof was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I fumbled for my phone. Still dead, but I could walk out. I had to walk out. I turned on my headlamp. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating the factory floor. I froze. The mountains of machinery were gone, the collapsed shelving, the vines. The entire first floor was swept clean. Spotless concrete stretched to the far walls, and in the center of the floor, arranged in a perfect circle, were 37 statues, bone white, smiling, eyes shut tight. They were all facing me. My breath hitched. I backed away, my boots scraping on the concrete. The statues didn't move. Their smiles didn't waver, but the whispers returned, not in my head, but from the statues themselves. A dry, rustling sigh that seemed to rise from the floor. "You came back." I ran for the main doors. They were chained shut, padlocked. The rain hammered the roof. I pounded on the glass of a broken window, screaming for help until my fists bled. No one came. The town was abandoned at night. I was alone with them. I turned back. The statues hadn't moved, but the circle was open. A space waited for me. The whispers grew louder, warmer, coaxing. "Come home, Daniel. Be still. Be quiet. Be remembered." I knew then I'd never leave. The tunnel wasn't a door, it was a throat, and this place, it didn't just remember names. It kept them. It kept us. I walked toward the circle. My boots echoed on the empty floor. The coppery smell returned, thick and sweet. The whispers wrapped around me like roots. "Smile, Daniel." I did. My jaw ached. My cheeks split. Dark sap welled in the corners of my eyes. The last human thought I had, "Sarah's going to worry," dissolved like smoke. The cold spread through my bones, not painful, but deep, right. The concrete floor softened beneath my feet, became soil, became stone. I felt my fingers stiffen, my skin harden, my smile widen. The whispers faded to a hum. The rain on the roof became the pulse of the earth. The statues nodded their stone heads, welcoming, waiting. They found me 3 days later, factory workers clearing debris for the new warehouse development. They pried open the rusted basement door, expecting squatters. They found a circle of statues, 38 of them, all bone white, all smiling, all with eyes squeezed shut tight. Mine was the smallest, the newest. My flannel shirt was perfectly preserved under the stone, frozen mid-reach. My face was tilted up, as if listening to something only I could hear. They chipped a piece off my hand for analysis. It crumbled to black soil in the lab. They sealed the basement, paved over the factory grounds, built a strip mall on top. But sometimes, on still nights, the night manager hears it. A dry, papery rustling from the vents, and faint layered whispers just beneath the hum of the neon signs. "Daniel, it's warmer here. Don't blink. Welcome home." I hear them too. From where I stand in the circle, the rain doesn't fall here, only the deep, slow thrum of the stone, the pulse of the place that shouldn't exist. The tunnel is always hungry. It remembers your name. It's waiting for you to close your eyes, to take that first step down the stairs, to come home. I smile wider, wider, until the stone cracks at the corners of my mouth, until the whispers become my breath, until I am not Daniel anymore. I am memory. I am stone. I am the waiting, and the tunnel breathes behind me, deep in the earth, patient, always patient. It knows you'll come. Everyone comes home eventually. Just listen for the rain. Listen for the sigh of the door. Listen for the cold that bites when you stop walking. The tunnel is open. It remembers you. It's been waiting. Come home. Smile for us. We've saved you a spot. Right here, in the quiet dark. Where the light ends. Where the stone remembers. Where you belong. Don't blink. Don't look back. Just walk. The stairs are right there. Can't you feel the cold? It's warmer ahead. We've been waiting. We've been so very hungry. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. The woods around our tent sounded like they were breathing. Maya's the one who wanted to camp. Digital detox, she'd called it, waving her phone in the air like a talisman against her rising anxiety. Just us, the stars, and zero notifications. I'd agreed, partly because I could see the fraying edges of her composure after the layoff, partly because I was tired of arguing. We drove the old Subaru deep into the Adirondacks, past cell service, past the last ranger station, following a crumpled paper map she'd found at a gas station. The road narrowed to gravel, then dirt, then vanished entirely under a canopy of hemlocks so dense the afternoon sun barely touched the forest floor. We parked where the tires sank into mud, shouldered our packs, and hiked until Maya declared a spot perfect. A mossy clearing beside a black, glassy lake ringed by ancient pines whose branches hung low like the arms of mourners. We set up the tent as dusk bled into twilight. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, sharp and clean. Maya hummed, unpacking the cooler while I gathered firewood. But the usual forest sounds were missing. No chirping crickets, no rustle of squirrels in the underbrush. Just the occasional plop of a fish breaking the lake's surface. The silence felt heavy, watchful. Maya didn't seem to notice. She was already lighting the campfire, the flames cast in long, leaping shadows that made the tree trunks look like they were swaying. "See?" she said, stirring a pot of chili. "This is what we needed. No emails, no doom scrolling, just peace." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were shadowed, tired. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this would fix the brittle silence that had grown between us since her job disappeared. Darkness fell fast under the trees. The fire crackled, the only sound in the vast quiet. We ate in near silence, the chili too hot, the bread stale. Maya poked the flames with a stick. "Remember that cabin in Vermont? The one with the leaky roof?" "Yeah," I said. You made hot chocolate with marshmallows melting down your wrist. A ghost of her old smile flickered. You kissed the marshmallow off. I reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold. Before I could say anything, she pulled away, turning toward the lake. "Listen," she whispered. I did. The fire popped. The lake lapped softly at the shore, and beneath it, a sound, low, rhythmic, a deep, wet inhalation that seemed to come from the trees themselves. It wasn't wind. The night air was utterly still. No leaves stirred. This was slower, heavier, a vast, shuddering breath drawn through roots and soil and ancient bark. It filled the clearing, vibrating in my chest, making the ground tremble faintly under my sleeping pad. "Ho!" Maya's face went pale in the firelight. What is that?" "I don't know." My voice sounded thin. "Wind in the rocks, maybe? Some kind of echo?" But the sound came again, louder, closer, a deep, rattling exhale. This time, carrying the scent of wet loam and something sweetly rotten, like overripe plums left in a damp cellar. The firelight dimmed, as if the flames were being smothered. The shadows between the pines deepened, thickening into something solid. "Ben," Maya breathed, her hand clamping onto my wrist, her nails dug in. "It's not wind." We huddled closer to the fire, staring into the black wall of trees. The breathing didn't stop. It settled into a rhythm, slow, deliberate, like the pulse of the earth itself. "Ha, oh, ha, ha, ha." Each inhale sucked the warmth from the air. Each exhale carried that cloying, rotten, sweet smell. The fire sputtered, throwing erratic shadows that made the trees seem to lean inward. "It's just the forest," I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. "Old trees settling, underground streams." My rationalization sounded hollow even to me. The sound was too alive, too intentional. It wasn't surrounding us, it was focusing on us. Maya stood abruptly, grabbing her headlamp. "I need air. I'm walking to the lake." "Don't," I said, catching her arm. "Not alone, not now." She yanked free. "I'm suffocating in here with that sound." She stepped past the fire's circle of light, her beam cutting a shaky path toward the water. I followed, my own headlamp sweeping the underbrush. The breathing deepened as she moved away from the tent, becoming a low thrum that vibrated in my molars. It wasn't coming from one direction. It came from everywhere, from the soil under my boots, from the air in my lungs. Maya reached the water's edge and stopped. Her light reflected on the black surface. For a moment, the breathing paused. The silence was worse, absolute, terrifying. Then a new sound, a soft lapping, not from the lake, but from the trees, directly behind her. Dry, papery leaves skittering over stone, slow, deliberate, getting closer. "Maya, get back here," I yelled, my voice cracking. She turned, her face white with terror. Her headlamp beam swung wildly, catching the edge of the tree line. For a split second, the light illuminated something that wasn't a shadow, something between the pines, tall, impossibly thin. Its outline blurred like heat haze off asphalt. But wrong. A distortion in the air that made the trees behind it waver. It had no face, just a deeper darkness where a face should be. And it was breathing, a slow, wet inhalation that pulled the light from Maya's beam, making the darkness around it swell. She screamed, not a startled yell, but a raw animal sound of pure terror. She stumbled backward, tripping over a root, splashing into the shallows. I grabbed her arm, hauling her up, dragging her toward the tent. The breathing surged, a deep, hungry roar that shook the ground. Branches snapped, not from wind, from movement. Something large and swift was closing the distance through the trees. We crashed into the tent, zipping the rainfly shut with fumbling fingers. I flipped on our battery-powered lantern. The nylon walls shuddered as something heavy brushed against them. The breathing was right outside now, so loud it drowned out Maya's sobs. Huh! Each exhale fogged the inside of the tent. The air grew thick, humid, reeking of decay. The lantern light flickered, dimming as if the batteries were draining. "It knows we're here," Maya whispered, pressing her back against the tent wall. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "It tastes us." I pulled my pocket knife. A useless gesture, but it made me feel less naked. The breathing slowed, deepened, became a low rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the sleeping pads, through my bones. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a physical pressure pushing against my chest, making it hard to draw my own breath. My lungs burned. Maya gasped beside me, clutching her throat. The tent flap bulged inward, not from wind, from something pressing against it from outside. A long root-like tendril, black and glistening with sap, slid under the zipper. It didn't feel its way. It sought. It curved toward Maya, drawn to her rapid, panicked breaths. She scrambled backward, hitting the far wall. The tendril followed, dripping dark fluid onto the floor mat. The smell intensified, rotten plums and wet earth and something metallic like old blood. I slashed at it with the knife. The blade passed through the tendril like smoke. It didn't bleed, it didn't recoil. It simply reformed, thicker now, the tip splitting into finer filaments that reached for Maya's face. She screamed again, a choked, wet sound. The breathing outside deepened, becoming a guttural purr of satisfaction. Oh, ha! It was feeding on her fear, on her breath. I grabbed the lantern, its light now a sickly yellow, and hurled it at the tent wall near the tendril. Glass shattered. The light died. In the sudden darkness, the breathing stopped. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Maya's sobs hitched. Is it gone?" I held my breath, listening. No wind, no lake, no insects. Just the frantic hammering of my own heart. Then a new sound, soft, delicate, like bare feet stepping on moss, right outside the tent, pausing, listening back. Tap, tap, tap. It circled the tent slowly, deliberately, stopping near Maya's side. The nylon fabric dimpled inward as if an invisible finger pressed against it. The rotten sweet smell flooded back, thick enough to choke on. Maya whimpered, pulling her knees to her chest. I reached for her hand, my fingers finding hers, icy cold, slick with sweat. The tap, tap, tap stopped directly in front of the tent door. The zipper began to slide down, not fast, not violently, smooth, controlled. An inch, 2 inches. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the full force of that decaying sweetness. I raised the knife, my arm trembling. Moonlight bled through the opening. It wasn't a hand that reached in. It was a root, thick as my wrist, black and gnarled, ending not in fingers, but in a cluster of pale, fleshy nodules that pulsed like grubs. It hovered in the gap, swaying gently. Then it inhaled, a soft, wet shoosh that pulled the air, and Maya's terrified whimpers toward it. Her breath left her in a visible cloud, sucked into those pale nodules which glowed faintly for a second before dimming. Her eyes rolled back. She slumped against the wall unconscious, Rage cut through my fear. I lunged forward, not at the root, but at the zipper. I yanked it shut, my fingers scraping against the rough nylon. The root snapped back with a sound like tearing bark. The breathing roared back, a furious wet snarl that shook the entire tent. The walls bowed inward. Branches scraped against the rainfly like claws. The rotten smell became overwhelming, thick with spores that made my eyes water and my throat close. I fumbled for the emergency whistle on my pack, blowing it until my lips went numb. The shriek was swallowed by the forest's breath. No ranger was coming. No one was coming. I dragged Maya's limp body toward the back of the tent, away from the door. Her skin was clammy. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. The root was back at the zipper, probing the seam. The breathing outside slowed, deepened, became a low, satisfied hum. Oh, ha. It wasn't just taking her breath. It was taking her calm, her stillness. It preferred her quiet. I remembered the ranger's offhand comment at the trailhead that morning. Respect the stillness out here. Some woods don't like noise or movement. I'd laughed it off. Now I understood. This forest didn't just have silence. It was silence. A living, hungry silence that fed on sound, on breath, on the frantic energy of living things. Our fire, our voices, our very breathing had been a dinner bell. The root slipped under the door again. I didn't slash at it. I didn't move. I held Maya close, covering her mouth with my hand, not to silence her, but to share my breath with her. I slowed my own breathing. Deep, slow, deliberate. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. The root paused. The breathing outside hitched. The violent shaking of the tent stilled. The rotten smell lessened, replaced by the clean scent of pine. The root slowly retracted. The zipper stopped rattling. The deep, rhythmic breathing returned, but softer now, calmer, almost curious. Oh, ha! I kept breathing, slow, steady, matching the forest's rhythm. Maya stirred in my arms, her own breaths deepening, sinking with mine. The lantern's shattered glass glittered in the moonlight, filtering through the tent walls. Outside, the breathing continued. Not hungry anymore, watching, waiting, as if deciding whether we were prey or something else, something that could learn to be still. Dawn came as a gray seep through the nylon. The breathing had faded with the stars, replaced by the tentative chirp of a single bird. I unzipped the tent slowly, bracing for the rot smell, the grasping roots, but the air was crisp, clean. The lake glittered under a pale sun. The pines stood silent, majestic. No torn earth, no broken branches, just our trampled campsite and the cold ashes of the fire. Maya woke shivering. She didn't speak. She packed in silence, her movements slow, careful, as if afraid to disturb the air. We hiked back to the car without looking back. The forest was quiet, peaceful, the way Maya had wanted. We didn't talk about it on the drive home, or in the weeks that followed. We stopped camping, stopped hiking. Maya started therapy. I installed blackout curtains in our bedroom, craving the silence we'd fled to the woods to find. But the forest followed us. It's in the quiet moments. When the city noise fades at 3 a.m., when I hold my breath reaching for the light switch, that's when I hear it, faint, rhythmic, beneath the hum of the refrigerator, beneath the thud of my own heart. Hoo, ha, and I realize I've stopped noticing the city sounds, the sirens, the traffic, the voices through thin walls. My world has narrowed to that rhythm. I catch myself slowing my breath to match it, waiting for the silence between exhales. Craving it. Last Tuesday, Maya found me standing barefoot in the kitchen at 2 a.m. The lights were off. I was perfectly still, listening to the house settle. She didn't turn on the light. She just stood in the doorway, her own breath slow and quiet, syncing with mine, syncing with the silence. "It's louder here now," she whispered, her voice barely a sigh. "In the city? Can you hear it? Under everything?" I nodded. I could. The breathing wasn't just in the woods anymore. It was in the walls, in the pipes, in the spaces between heartbeats. It had learned our rhythm, and it was teaching us its own. This morning, I woke to Maya's hand on my arm. Her eyes were open, wide in the pre-dawn gloom. She didn't speak. She just pointed to the window. Outside, the city skyline was silhouetted against a gray dawn. But between the buildings and the narrow gap above the fire escape, the air wasn't empty. It shimmered like heat haze, like breath on a cold morning. And the silence was deep, deep and hungry, waiting for us to stop moving, waiting for us to stop breathing. Maya took my hand. Her palm was warm, dry, calm. She guided my fingers to her throat. I felt her pulse, slow, steady. Thump, thump, thump. She leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. Her whisper was barely audible, but the forest heard it. We both heard it. "Listen," she breathed. "It's learning your name." Outside, the shimmering air deepened. The silence pressed against the glass, and from the gap between the buildings, a slow, wet inhalation filled the quiet street. "Ha!" I closed my eyes. I let my breath out, long, slow, matching hers, matching its rhythm. The fear was still there, cold in my gut, but beneath it, something else stirred, a terrible, ancient peace, the peace of deep roots, of stone, of earth that has forgotten the sun. Maya's fingers tightened on mine. Her breath hitched, not with fear, but with surrender. She was teaching me, showing me how to be still, how to be quiet, how to belong to the silence. The exhale came then. Ha! Warm, damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth and something sweetly rotten. It filled the room thick as fog. The street lights flickered and died. The city sounds vanished. Only the breathing remained. Ours, its one rhythm, one hunger. I opened my eyes. Maya was smiling. A small, serene smile. Her eyes were half closed. Calm. The shimmering air pressed against the window. Closer now. Reaching. I didn't pull away. I leaned into her, into the warmth, into the silence. I let my next breath out slowly, deliberately, offering it to the dark, to the forest, to the thing that had waited so long for us to be still. The window pane frosted over, not with cold, with breath, and in the condensation written in the vapor of our shared sigh, 2 words appeared. Welcome home. Maya's hand found mine again under the covers, her fingers laced with mine, warm and sure. Outside, the city hummed its oblivious song, but beneath it, beneath the traffic and the sirens and the thump of a neighbor's bass, the deep rhythm continued, steady, patient, eternal. Ha, ha. I closed my eyes. I stopped fighting the silence. I let my breath slow, deepen, match the pulse of the earth, match the hunger in the dark. The forest wasn't outside anymore. It was inside, in my lungs, in my blood, in the quiet space between heartbeats where the world finally made sense. Maya squeezed my hand. Her breath was a soft sigh against my shoulder. Ha, I answered without sound. Ho, The city lights bled through the curtains. The world turned, but here, in the quiet dark, we were home. The breathing wrapped around us like roots, like love, like the oldest promise the earth ever made. Be still, be quiet, belong. I drifted into sleep, not with dreams, but with the deep, wordless understanding of stone and soil. The last thing I felt was Maya's breath, warm on my neck, and beneath it, the vast, slow pulse of the forest breathing us in, breathing us out, breathing us whole. The silence wasn't empty, it was full, full of ancient hunger, full of patient love, full of home. I stopped counting the breaths. I became them. Oh, ha, ha, ha. The city could wait. The world could wait. Here in the quiet, we were finally still, finally safe, finally fed. The forest's breath filled my lungs, sweet with rot and pine, and I knew I would never leave this silence again. I would never need to. The hunger was gone. Only peace remained, deep, endless, breathing, always breathing. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. There's a playground hidden deep in the forest, and it only moves at night. The first time I saw it, I thought I was hallucinating from dehydration. I'd been hiking the Blackwater Trail for hours, chasing the ghost of a childhood memory, my grandfather's stories of a hidden grove where the deer gathered at dawn. My canteen was empty, my boots were full of blisters, and the late afternoon sun beat down like a physical weight through the dense canopy of the Adirondacks. The trail markers had vanished miles back, replaced by an unnerving silence. No birds, no squirrels, just the dry rasp of my own breath and the crunch of pine needles underfoot. The air smelled wrong, damp earth, and something sweetly cloying, like overripe plums left in a sealed cellar. Then I stepped into the clearing. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't natural. In the center of a perfect circle of ancient pines stood a playground. Not a modern, safety-tested structure, but something older. Rusting? Metal. Peeling paint. A swing set with chains thick as my wrist. Its seats made of cracked, splintered wood. A jungle gym twisted into impossible shapes, like a dragon's spine forged from iron. A merry-go-round, its horses frozen mid-gallop, their eyes hollow sockets painted with faded red dots. A slide, its surface scarred with deep gouges, tilted at a steep, dangerous angle. Everything was coated in a fine layer of gray dust, yet the metal didn't rust. The wood didn't rot. It looked preserved. Waiting? The silence here was deeper than in the forest, oppressive, watchful. I took a step forward, drawn by the sheer wrongness of it. My boot crunched on the gravel path that led to the swing set. The sound echoed unnaturally loud. That's when I felt it. A vibration, not through the ground, through the air. A low rhythmic thrum like the heartbeat of something vast and sleeping. It came from the merry-go-round. As I watched, one of the iron horses twitched. Just a fraction. Its head tilted toward me, the red-painted eyes seeming to focus. I froze. My blood turned to ice. The swing set creaked, not from wind. There was no wind. The chains groaned, and the wooden seat swung slowly, gently, as if an invisible child had just pushed off. It drifted back, then forward, stopping directly in front of me, empty, waiting. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. The jungle gym emitted a dry metallic clink, like bones rattling. The slide surface seemed to shimmer, the gouges deepening for a split second before smoothing out again. The thrumming intensified, vibrating in my teeth, in my bones. It wasn't a heartbeat, it was a hunger. I ran. I didn't stop until I collapsed against a mossy boulder half a mile away, gasping for breath, my throat raw. The forest sounds had returned, tentative bird calls, the rustle of a squirrel, but the cloying sweetness lingered in my nostrils. I told myself it was a relic, an old logging camp's forgotten play area, a trick of the light, exhaustion. I didn't tell Jess when I got back to our cabin. She was already on edge after her layoff, jumping at shadows. I didn't want to feed her anxiety, but the image of that swing, drifting empty in the silent clearing, haunted my dreams. The way the merry-go-round horse had looked at me. 2 nights later, Jess was gone. I woke to an empty bed, the cabin door standing open, rain lashing the porch. Her boots were gone. Her headlamp was missing. Panic seized me. I grabbed my own light and ran into the storm, calling her name until my voice cracked. The rain muffled everything, turning the forest into a gray, watery maze. I found her tracks near the old ranger station trail, mud splattered, leading away from the cabin, deeper into the woods, not toward the main road, toward the Blackwater Trail, toward my clearing. I followed them, my headlamp beam cutting through the downpour. The tracks were clear, purposeful. They led straight to the edge of the pine circle, but the clearing was empty. No swing set, no jungle gym, no merry-go-round, just undisturbed moss, ancient pines, and the soft patter of rain. The gravel path was gone. The space where the playground had been was just forest floor. Jess's tracks stopped at the tree line, abruptly, as if she'd simply vanished. "Jess!" I screamed into the rain. "Where are you?" Silence. Then, faintly beneath the drumming rain, I heard it. Music, tinny, off-key. A child's music box playing Rockabye Baby. It came from behind me. I whirled around. The music box sat on a mossy log just outside the clearing. Porcelain, painted with faded blue roses. One of its ballerinas was missing an arm. It wasn't playing in the rain. The lid was closed, dry. I picked it up. It was warm. The music stopped. The rain stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, thicker than before. The cloying sweetness surged, so strong it made my eyes water, and from the center of the empty clearing, the vibration began again. The low, rhythmic thrum, louder, closer. Then the ground moved, not an earthquake, a shifting. The moss rippled like water. The pine roots groaned, twisting deeper into the earth. From the spot where the merry-go-round had been, the soil bulged upward, then split. Rusted iron bars, thick as tree trunks, pushed through the earth, twisting, rising, forming the familiar, impossible shape of the jungle gym. From another spot, the slide erupted, its scarred surface gleaming wetly in the moonlight that suddenly pierced the clouds. The swing set rose last, its chains rattling like dry bones, the wooden seats swinging gently in the now still air. The playground hadn't been hidden. It had been sleeping, and it was awake now. On the merry-go-round, sitting astride one of the iron horses, was Jess. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the moonlight like polished stones. Her skin had the subtle gray pallor of old marble. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just sat there, a serene, empty smile on her lips, her hands gripping the horse's mane made of knotted roots. "Jess!" I choked out, stumbling forward. She turned her head slowly, mechanically, like a statue on a stiff hinge. Her voice, when it came, was layered with dry whispers like pages turning in a forgotten book. "It's warm here, Ben. So warm. No more noise. No more fear." She patted the horse behind her. "There's room for you, too. The swing's waiting." The empty wooden seat drifted slowly toward me, stopping at the edge of the gravel path that had reappeared. It creaked invitingly. I backed away, tears freezing on my cheeks. "What did you do to her?" I yelled at the playground, at the trees, at the hungry dark. The merry-go-round began to turn, slowly, not from wind, from will. The iron horses' heads snapped toward me, their red eyes glowing faintly. The jungle gym shuddered, its bars flexing like living limbs. The slide surface rippled, the gouges deepening into hungry mouths. The thrumming became a roar, vibrating the gravel under my boots. Jess's voice cut through it, calm, pitying. "It didn't do anything, Ben. It listens. It hears the hollow places, the loneliness, the ache for quiet." She tilted her head, her stone eyes fixed on mine. "You feel it too, don't you? The noise inside your head? The silence is so loud when you're alone." She was right. The loneliness since Sarah left. The hollow echo of my empty apartment. The constant grinding fear of not being enough. The playground didn't just see it. It tasted it. And it was offering an end. A deep, wordless peace. The swing drifted closer. The music box on the log began to play again. Rock-a-bye, baby, tinny and sweet. The cloying scent of overripe plums filled the air. The gravel path seemed to pull at my feet. "Just sit down, Ben," Jess whispered, her voice warm with remembered love. "Close your eyes. The swinging is so soft. The quiet is so deep. We'll be together forever." I took a step forward, then another. The ache in my chest wasn't pain anymore. It was relief. The thrumming wasn't hunger. It was a lullaby. The swing wasn't metal and wood. It was an open hand, an invitation home. I reached for the wooden seat. It was warm. I sat down. The chains didn't creak. They sang. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through my bones, into my marrow. The swinging began, not pushed by hands, by the earth itself, gentle, rhythmic, soothing. Jess smiled, a real smile, warm and human, breaking through the stone. She reached out a hand, not marble, warm skin. "Welcome home," she breathed. The merry-go-round spun faster. The jungle gym unfolded like a blooming flower of iron and bone. The slide gleamed under the moon, a path to somewhere, warm and dark. The music box played on, my skin hardened, grayed. The hollow places filled with roots and stone and deep, wordless peace. My eyes closed, not with lids, with stone. The last human thought, Sarah would be worried, dissolved like mist. The playground settled, the thrumming softened to a pulse. The gravel path smoothed itself. The music box fell silent. At dawn, a hiker found the music box on the mossy log, warm, dry. He picked it up, smiling at the blue roses. "Lucky find," he told his girlfriend later. "Perfect for our nursery." She laughed, rubbing her pregnant belly. "Our little one will love it." He didn't feel the music box grow warm in his pocket that night. He didn't hear the dry, papery rustle beneath his floorboards. He didn't smell the scent of overripe plums on a wind. But that night, as he drifted to sleep, he dreamed of a moonlit clearing, of a rusting swing set, of a woman with stone eyes holding out a hand, and, in the empty space beside her on the merry-go-round, a spot waited. For him, for his child. The music box in his pocket pulsed once, warm, patient, hungry. The playground doesn't stay hidden. It moves. It follows the lonely, the weary, the ones who ache for silence. It offers a swing in the warm dark, a horse to ride into forever. All you have to do is sit down. All you have to do is let go. It's waiting right now. Can you hear the thrumming in your bones? Can you smell the sweetness on the wind? Can you feel the gravel path pulling at your feet? Don't be afraid of the empty swing. Be afraid of the loneliness that walks with you. The playground is always hungry for one more to sit in the warm dark, one more to smile with stone-filled mouths, one more to whisper, "Welcome home." I swing gently now. Jess's hand is warm in mine. The thrumming is our heartbeat. The silence is full of love. The next lost soul will come. They always do. The swing is waiting. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. We camped in a clearing that wasn't there the next morning. The argument started over the map. Jess spread it out on the hood of her battered Subaru, the afternoon sun glinting off the laminated surface. "See? Right here, Whisper Falls Trailhead. 3 miles in, there's supposed to be a perfect camping spot, flat ground, a spring, even an old fire ring. My cousin swears by it." She tapped a spot marked with a tiny blue droplet symbol. "Says it's the only place in the black spruce wilderness that doesn't have mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds." I squinted at the map. The grid lines were faded, the trail markings smudged. "This thing looks older than my grandpa's hunting rifle, Jess." "And your cousin Dave, the guy who got lost in the Walmart parking lot last Christmas?" "I don't know." The forest around the trailhead parking lot was already unnerving. Ancient pines, their bark deeply furrowed like the skin of giants, crowded close to the asphalt. The air smelled thickly of damp earth and pine resin, but underneath it, a faint, sweetish odor lingered, like overripe fruit left in a damp cellar. The usual forest sounds were absent. No birdsong, no squirrels chattering, just a deep, watchful silence that pressed against my eardrums. A hand-painted sign nailed to a post near the trailhead read, "Respect the quiet. Some things sleep." It looked weathered, the wood bleached gray, the lettering faded, but still legible. Below it, someone had carved a crude symbol into the post, a circle with a single jagged line through it. "Dave's fine," Jess insisted, shoving the map into her pack. "He just has a bad sense of direction. Unlike us, we have GPS." She brandished her phone triumphantly. The screen flickered, showing 1 bar of signal, then dropped to 0 as she stepped away from the car. She frowned, shaking it. "Must be the tree cover. It'll pick up on the trail. Come on, Ben, it's barely 2 p.m. We'll be set up by dinner. Think of the stars tonight. No light pollution for miles." Her enthusiasm was infectious, a shield against the creeping unease the silent woods gave me. I'd agreed to this trip, a long weekend backpacking trip to reconnect with nature after my layoff, partly because I needed the distraction and partly because Jess's bright, stubborn energy was hard to refuse. I should have trusted my gut when the Subaru's GPS died completely 10 miles back, replaced by a screen full of static snow. The trail was narrow, overgrown in places, the path barely visible beneath a thick carpet of pine needles. The deeper we went, the heavier the silence became. The sweet, cloying smell grew stronger, mingling with the pine until it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't unpleasant, exactly. It reminded me of the vanilla-scented candles my grandmother used to burn, but mixed with something sharper, like ozone after a storm. Jess chattered about work, about her new apartment, about anything to fill the void, but her voice sounded thin and swallowed by the trees. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, as if the forest floor was absorbing sound. After an hour, the GPS on Jess's phone remained stubbornly dead. The trail markers, faded blue diamonds nailed to trees, became sparse, then vanished entirely. We stopped at a fork where no marker existed. One path looked slightly more trodden, dipping down into a ravine. The other climbed a steep, rocky slope. "I think it's this way," Jess said, pointing to the downward path, her confidence wavering. "Downhill usually leads to water, right? The spring—" I looked up the rocky slope. Sunlight dappled through the branches ahead, illuminating a patch of startlingly bright green moss on a boulder. It felt inviting, warm. "What about up there? That light looks promising. Maybe it opens up." Jess sighed, wiping sweat from her brow. "Ben, we've been walking uphill for an hour. My knees are killing." "Me? Down is easier. And water. We need water." She started down the ravine path without waiting. Reluctantly, I followed. The ravine deepened quickly. The walls rose on either side, covered in thick moss and veined with dark, wet rock. The air grew colder, damper. The sweet smell intensified, now carrying a distinct undertone of decay. Wet leaves left too long in a sealed bag. The path became slick mud. We slipped and slid, grabbing at roots and branches to stay upright. The silence was absolute now. No wind in the high branches, no distant animal calls. Just the squelch of our boots and our own ragged breathing. "Jess," I started, my voice low. "This doesn't feel right. That smell, it's getting worse, and it's so quiet. Too quiet." She stopped, leaning against a mossy boulder, breathing hard. Her face was pale beneath the sweat. "I know," she admitted quietly, her bravado gone. "I know it's weird, but we're committed now. Turning back feels worse." She pointed ahead, where the ravine walls seemed to narrow almost to a point. "Look, there's light ahead. Maybe it opens up. Maybe that's the clearing." We pushed forward, the mud sucking at our boots. The narrow passage opened abruptly. We stepped into paradise. The clearing was perhaps 50 yards across, perfectly circular, ringed by towering ancient pines whose branches formed a dense green canopy high above. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the leaves, dappling the thick carpet of emerald moss that covered the entire ground. In the center, a crystal-clear spring bubbled up from a crack in a smooth, flat stone, forming a small, perfectly still pool before vanishing underground again. Wildflowers, vibrant purple lupines, delicate white trilliums, dotted the moss near the water's edge. The air hummed with warmth and that same sweet, vanilla ozone scent. But here it was clean, inviting, almost intoxicating. The oppressive silence of the forest was gone, replaced by the gentle, musical trickle of the spring and the soft sigh of a breeze high in the canopy. It felt like stepping into a painting, a sanctuary. "Oh my God," Jess breathed, her exhaustion forgotten. "It's perfect, just like Dave said." She dropped her pack with a thud, already pulling out her water filter. "See? Told you we'd find it." I couldn't argue. The clearing radiated peace. The fear that had coiled in my gut since the trailhead dissolved, replaced by profound relief. We set up camp quickly, pitching our small tent on the thick, springy moss near the spring, filtering water that tasted pure and cold, gathering dry twigs for a fire. As dusk painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, we sat by the crackling fire, eating rehydrated stew, laughing at how worried we'd been. The stars emerged, brilliant and countless, undimmed by any city glow. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like spilled diamonds. The only sounds were the fire's pop, the spring's gentle murmur, and the soft rustle of the breeze in the high branches. It was the most beautiful, peaceful place I'd ever been. The perfect escape. Jess fell asleep first, curled in her sleeping bag inside the tent. I stayed up, mesmerized by the stars, the warmth of the fire on my face, the sweet scent filling my lungs. That's when I first heard it, faint, almost beneath the crackling fire. A whisper, not words, just a soft, rhythmic hush, 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 like breath escaping lips. It seemed to come from the edge of the clearing near the ring of trees. I scanned the darkness, my firelight barely reaching the first trunks. Nothing moved, just the deep shadows between the pines. I told myself it was the wind in the high branches, though the breeze had died down. I added more wood to the fire, the flames leaping higher, casting longer, dancing shadows that seemed to twitch at the edge of the clearing. The hush, hush sound stopped. I relaxed, sipping warm tea, watching the embers glow. I must have dozed off. I woke with a start, shivering. The fire had burned down to coals. The clearing was cold, the sweet scent gone, replaced by a damp, earthy chill. And the whispering was back, louder now, clearer, not just hush, hush, but layered voices, dry and papery like dead leaves skittering on stone. They seemed to come from all around the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the dying firelight. Stay, sleep, stay. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. Jess slept soundly beside me, oblivious. I grabbed my headlamp, clicking it on. The beam cut through the gloom, sweeping the edge of the clearing. The moss stopped abruptly at the tree line. Beyond it, the forest was pure black. I saw nothing, but the whispering intensified, swirling around us like smoke. Warm, safe, stay, sleep. It wasn't threatening. It was soothing, seductive, promising comfort, promising an end to the fear, the job loss, the gnawing uncertainty that had followed me into these woods. Just close your eyes. Stay. Sleep. Forever. The voice that spoke those words in my head wasn't strange. It was my own voice, but calm, peaceful, free of all worry. It felt like home. I shook my head violently, slapping my cheek. Wake up! I stumbled to my feet, grabbing Jess's shoulder. Jess, wake up! We have to go, now! She startled awake, disoriented. Ben, what's wrong? Did you hear a bear? No bear. Worse. We have to pack, right now. Leave everything but the essentials. Water, headlamps. Go! My voice was tight with panic. I started frantically stuffing sleeping bags into stuff sacks, my hands trembling. The whispering rose to a chorus, no longer soothing, but insistent, almost angry. Stay, sleep, warm, safe. The fire, which had been nearly dead, flared violently, not with orange flame, but with a sickly, greenish light that cast long, distorted shadows that writhed on the moss. The sweet vanilla smell surged back, thick and cloying, making my head swim. Jess was scrambling now, wide-eyed with terror, grabbing her pack. We abandoned the tent, the stove, most of our food. We only kept water bottles, headlamps, and our rain jackets. As we shouldered our packs, I took one last look back at the clearing. In the dying, eerie green light, the perfect circle of moss looked different. The vibrant green seemed leached away near the edges. The wildflowers by the spring were withered, blackened stalks. And the spring itself. The water wasn't clear anymore. It was thick, slow-moving, the color of weak tea. The whispering wasn't just voices now. It was a physical pressure, a vibration in my bones that whispered, "Stay, sleep, belong." "Don't look back," Jess gasped, grabbing my arm. "Just run!" We crashed into the forest, away from the ravine, scrambling blindly uphill, following the faint memory of the slope we'd rejected hours before. We didn't stop to check the trail, didn't care about noise. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs gave out, collapsing against the massive trunk of an ancient pine. Dawn was bleeding gray light through the canopy. The cloying sweetness was gone, replaced by the sharp, clean scent of pine and damp earth. The forest sounds had returned, tentative birdsong, the chatter of a distant squirrel. The oppressive silence was broken. We were safe. We'd escaped. We sat there for an hour, catching our breath, drinking warm water, shaking off the remnants of terror. The sun climbed higher, warming our faces. The nightmare of the clearing felt like a bad dream already fading. We found the blue diamond trail marker we'd passed before the fork, half hidden by ferns. Relief washed over me so strong I almost wept. We followed the markers back to the trailhead, the Subaru a blessed sight in the parking lot. We drove out in exhausted silence, stopping only for strong coffee at a dusty roadside diner 10 miles from the highway. The taste of cheap coffee, the drone of the highway, the sight of other cars, it all felt like re-entering the real world after a fever dream. We didn't talk much about the clearing on the drive back to Portland. We dismissed it as exhaustion, dehydration, a shared stress hallucination fueled by bad trail mix and isolation. We laughed about it weekly, calling it the Siren Spring. We told Dave it was great, just as he remembered. We buried the memory under work, city noise, and the comforting glow of screens. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning out the Subaru's trunk, tossing empty water bottles and muddy boots into the garage. Something crinkled under my foot. I'd missed a pocket in Jess's old backpack. Inside was a small Ziploc baggie of trail mix, and tucked beside it a single, perfect pine needle. It was unnaturally long, deep green, and smelled faintly, unmistakably, of vanilla and ozone. I dropped it like it was burning. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't seen Jess since the trip. We'd drifted, the shared trauma somehow creating a distance instead of a bond. I called her immediately. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I drove to her apartment. Her landlord said she'd moved out suddenly a week ago. "Left in a hurry," he'd muttered, polishing his glasses. "Took most things, but left some boxes in the storage unit. Said she'd be back for them. Never came back." I had the key. I went down to the dim concrete storage unit. Jess's things were scattered. Clothes and boxes, books, her hiking gear. In the corner, half buried under a sleeping bag, was her small camping stove. And on top of it, arranged with meticulous care, were hundreds of pine needles. Not just any pine needles, long, deep green ones, identical to the one in the Subaru. They weren't scattered, they were placed, forming words on the metal surface. "Come sleep." I backed out of the unit slowly, my breath coming in short gasps. I called the police, reported her missing. They took a report, asked questions, checked her phone records. The last call was to me, the night we got back from the trip. They found no signs of foul play at her apartment, just packed suitcases as if she'd planned to leave. But she was gone, vanished. I went back to the storage unit alone a week later, against my better judgment. The pine needles were gone. The stove was clean, But on the dusty concrete floor right where the stove had been, someone or something had traced letters into grime with a finger or a claw. "You smell like her." I ran. I left the city. I moved to a high-rise apartment in Seattle, far from any forest. I sleep with the lights on. I jump at shadows. But the worst part isn't the fear. It's the smell. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the city noise fades for a moment, I catch it, faint, drifting through the cracked window. Vanilla and ozone, and underneath it, the dry, papery whisper, not in my ears, but inside my skull, in my own voice, calm and peaceful, warm, safe. Stay, sleep. I keep a suitcase packed by the door, but I know it's pointless. The clearing wasn't just a place in the woods, it was a door, and it's still open. It found Jess through the pine needles. It found me through the memory of her scent. It knows where I live. It knows my name. It knows the exact shade of comfort I crave when the world feels too loud and too sharp. Last Tuesday, I found a single, perfect pine needle on my pillow. I threw it out the window, my hand shaking. But that night, as I lay rigid in the dark, listening to the city hum, I felt the mattress dip slightly beside me. Not a weight, a presence, cold. And the whisper came, softer than breath, carrying the scent of deep earth and forgotten springs. "We saved your spot." I haven't slept since. I sit by the window now, watching the city lights, the suitcase open at my feet. The pine needle on the windowsill glows faintly in the streetlight. I know if I look out, past the buildings, towards the distant mountains on the horizon, I'll see it. Not a shape, just a patch of deeper darkness between the city lights. A perfect circle, waiting. The clearing is always there. It just needs an invitation. It just needs me to close my eyes, just once, to breathe in that sweet, sweet air, to feel the moss beneath me, to hear the spring's gentle murmur, to finally sleep. The suitcase is packed, but my feet won't move towards the door. The whisper is warm. The darkness outside the window looks soft, like moss, like home. The pine needle on the sill trembles as if touched by unfelt breeze. I smell vanilla. I smell ozone. I smell the deep, wet earth of a place that doesn't exist on any map. My eyelids feel so heavy, so warm. Just a little sleep, just for a moment. The clearing is waiting. It remembers my name. It saved my spot. The city lights blur. The whisper becomes a lullaby. The darkness between the buildings deepens, forming a perfect circle. I lean forward, just to see, just to rest my eyes. The pine needle on the windowsill glows brighter, a tiny green light in the room. It spells a single word on the dusty glass, written in condensation that wasn't there before. Yes, and that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. We explored an abandoned hospital, and someone was still using the operating room. The ad was simple, almost suspiciously so. Room for rent, quiet, utilities included, 300-month, serious inquiries only, Whispers Pines area. No photos, just a grainy address scribbled at the bottom. My bank account was bleeding red after the layoff, and the thought of another month in that roach motel near the interstate made my skin crawl. Whispering Pines. I remembered the name. An old, sprawling complex on the outskirts of town, shuttered decades ago after a series of scandals involving patient neglect and unexplained deaths. The main asylum building was a crumbling landmark, a jagged silhouette against stormy skies in every local ghost story. But the ad mentioned a caretaker's cottage, a small structure tucked behind the overgrown grounds, separate from the main horror. Desperation overrode the chill that slithered down my spine when I typed the address into my dying phone. The owner, a gaunt man named Mr. Hargrave, with eyes that darted like trapped birds, met me at the rusted iron gate. He didn't smile. He jangled a heavy ring of keys, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence of the overgrown approach. The air smelled thickly of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, faintly chemical, like old antiseptic, buried under the rot. He led me past skeletal trees clawing at the gray afternoon sky, their branches scraping against the boarded-up windows of the main asylum building. It loomed, a decaying giant of brick and broken glass, its upper floors dark and hollow-eyed. Vines choked the fire escapes. Graffiti bled down its walls like infected wounds. Hargrave didn't look at it. He kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, towards a small single-story brick building partially swallowed by ivy and tall dead grass. "The cottage," he stated flatly, stopping before a heavy wooden door. It looked solid, surprisingly intact, compared to the monstrosity behind it. He unlocked it with a key that groaned in protest. Inside smelled of dust and mildew, but it was clean. Bare walls, a single window overlooking the asylum's overgrown rear courtyard, a narrow bed, a small sink, a hot plate, and a cold, empty space where a fridge should have been. The utilities were indeed on. A flickering fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, and the tap sputtered rusty water before clearing. It was sparse, cold, and the view was of looming decay, but it was $300. My last $300. "Quiet hours after 10, Hargrave muttered, handing me a single key. "No guests, no parties. You see anything unusual, you don't investigate. You stay inside, lock the door. Understand?" His eyes flickered towards the asylum building, then back to me, intense and warning. "This place, it's got history, bad history. Some folks say things linger. I just take care of the grounds." "Barely." He was gone before I could ask what he meant by grounds or linger. His footsteps crunching hurriedly away on the gravel path, leaving me alone with the buzzing light and the deepening shadows outside the window. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. The usual city hum. Distant traffic, sirens, the thump of bass from a car was absent, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. The only sounds were the wind sighing through the asylum's broken windows, the rustle of unseen creatures in the tall grass, and the persistent rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water from a leak somewhere in the cottage's roof. I tried to sleep, but the darkness outside the window felt alive, watchful. The asylum's silhouette seemed to lean closer, its empty windows like black sockets staring directly at my room. I pulled the thin blanket over my head, feeling foolish, but the unease was a physical weight on my chest. The noises started on the third night, not loud, not immediately terrifying, but wrong. Around 2 a.m., a soft scrape from the direction of the main building, like something heavy being dragged slowly across concrete. I told myself it was an animal, a raccoon maybe, rooting through debris. Then came the footsteps, not outside, but inside the cottage, faint, muffled, like someone walking in thick socks on the bare wooden floorboards in a tiny hallway leading to the neglected bathroom. I froze in bed, heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't heard the door open. The key was still on the nightstand. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. I rationalized it. Old pipes settling, the wind rattling a loose floorboard. Anything but what my gut was screaming. The next day, I explored the immediate area around the cottage, needing to shake off the clinging fear. The overgrown courtyard between the cottage and the asylum's rear entrance was a jungle of thorny bushes, knee-high weeds, and skeletal trees. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. The rear entrance of the asylum was a massive, rusted metal door, chained shut with a padlock thick with rust, but beside it, partially hidden by a collapsed section of chain-link fence, was a smaller service door. Its lock was broken, hanging loose. Curiosity, that stupid, persistent human trait, warred with Hargrave's warning, "You see anything unusual? You don't investigate?" But what if it was just decay? What if it was safe to see where I was living? I pushed the service door open. It groaned on stiff hinges, releasing a wave of stale, frigid air that carried that same underlying scent of antiseptic, now mixed with dust and something vaguely organic, like old meat left in a damp cellar. Darkness yawned before me. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a narrow corridor lined with peeling green paint. Debris littered the floor, broken glass, fallen ceiling tiles, scraps of fabric that might have once been uniforms. The air was bitingly cold, far colder than outside. My breath plumed in the light. I moved slowly, the beam trembling slightly in my hand. Doors lined the corridor, most hanging open on broken hinges, revealing empty rooms stripped bare or filled with rubble. Offices, maybe. Storage closets. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of grit under my boots and the frantic thudding of my own pulse in my ears. Then I saw the signs. Faded, peeling signs on some doors. Sterilization, linens, morgue, authorized personnel only. My stomach clenched. I shouldn't be here. Hargrave's warning echoed, but I needed to know. I needed to see the heart of the place. I found the stairs. A wide central staircase, its carpet long since rotted away, leaving bare, splintered wood steps. Handrails were cold, gritty metal. The upper floors were darker, the air thicker, colder. The beam of my phone caught dust motes dancing like agitated spirits. I passed a nurse's station, its counter covered in a thick layer of gray dust. An ancient, dead phone still cradled in its receiver. Charts lay scattered, their pages brittle and yellowed, filled with spidery handwriting and incomprehensible medical codes. The names were redacted, scratched out with violent strokes of black ink. That's when I saw the first thing that truly chilled me. In a small supply room off the main corridor, my light swept over a metal tray. It wasn't empty. Lying neatly arranged on the dust-covered surface were surgical instruments. Scalpels, forceps, retractors, a bone saw. They gleamed dully under my light, unnaturally clean compared to the surrounding grime. No rust, no dust on their sharp edges. It was as if they'd been used recently, carefully wiped down, and left waiting. My throat went dry. I backed out of the room quickly, not stopping to look further. The rationalizations were crumbling. Animals don't sterilize scalpels. I made it back to the cottage, slamming the door and locking it, my hands shaking. I didn't tell Hargrave. What could I say? I broke in and found clean scalpels. He'd throw me out, and I had nowhere else to go. That night, the noises returned, louder, not just scraping, thumping, heavy, deliberate impacts from deep within the asylum, vibrating faintly through the cottage's floorboards. And the footsteps inside the cottage hallway were back, closer this time. I heard the distinct click of the bathroom door latch turning. I didn't move. I lay rigid, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold, listening to the slow, soft tread of bare feet on the wooden floor just outside my bedroom door. They stopped. I held my breath. Minutes stretched like hours. Then a soft, sniffing sound right outside the keyhole, like something was smelling me. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat up in bed, back against the wall, a heavy flashlight gripped like a club in my hand, staring at the door until the gray light of dawn seeped through the window. I needed to leave. I needed to find a new place, swallow the loss of the deposit. But where? My savings were gone. Panic was a constant hum beneath my skin. Then my friend Ben called. Ben, the thrill-seeker, the urban explorer who loved abandoned places. He'd been texting me since I moved in, joking about ghost hunts. Desperation made me reckless. I told him everything. The ad, Hargrave's warnings, the noises, the clean instruments. Instead of concern, his voice crackled with excitement. Dude, Whispering Pines, that's legendary, the stories, the equipment they had back then, and you found clean tools? That's insane. I'm coming over tonight. We're going in properly. I've got better lights, a camera. We'll document it, maybe film something for my channel. This could be huge. No, Ben, really, it's not just stories. Something's in there. It's not right. I pleaded, but my voice sounded weak even to myself. The loneliness, the fear, the sheer weirdness of it all made his confidence infectious, a lifeline. Against every screaming instinct, I agreed. Maybe with two of us, with proper gear, it would feel less like trespassing on a grave and more like an investigation. Maybe I was just losing my mind from stress and isolation. Ben's arrival that evening, laden with powerful LED lanterns, a GoPro, and his usual boisterous energy, did make the cottage feel safer. The buzzing fluorescent light seemed less ominous. He laughed off my stories, chalking the noises up to old buildings settling and your paranoid city brain. Seriously, man, he said, clapping me on the back as we geared up in the cottage's dim light, this place is a gold mine. Abandoned asylums are the pinnacle, and you've got front row seats. We'll hit the main floor, maybe find the old admin offices, see if there's any records left. And that OR wing? Rumor has it they did some seriously messed up experimental surgeries in the basement ORs. That's the jackpot. The basement? My blood ran cold. I hadn't gone near any stairs down. Ben, Hargrave specifically? Hargrave's a weird old coot who probably waters his plants with moonshine, Ben interrupted, strapping on a headlamp. He's scared of his own shadow. We're just looking, documenting history. Come on, live a little. His enthusiasm was a shield. I put on my own headlamp, its beam cutting a shaky path in the dusty air. We left the cottage, the heavy door clicking shut behind us, locking me out of the only safe space I had. The service entrance groaned open again, the smell of cold decay hitting us like a physical blow. Ben's powerful lanterns banished the worst of the shadows, revealing the grim reality of the corridor in stark, unforgiving light. Dust hung thick in the beams. Debris was everywhere. The sterile scent was stronger here, mixed with the underlying rot. Ben narrated into his GoPro, his voice echoing slightly in the dead air. Whispering Pines Asylum back entrance. Date is, check the timestamp. exploring with my buddy, who's wisely remaining anonymous for legal reasons. Let's see what horrors await. We moved cautiously, Ben leading, his light sweeping over the ruined offices, the nurse's station. He paused at the supply room where I'd found the instruments. He shone his light inside. The tray was gone. The shelf was empty, covered in undisturbed dust except for a faint, clean rectangle where the metal had sat. Ben frowned. Must have been cleaned out recently, or taken by other explorers. He didn't sound convinced. The easy confidence had a slight edge to it now. We found the central staircase. Ben wanted to go up first, to the administrative floors. The steps were treacherous, slick with grime. The upper hallways were darker, the decay more advanced. Water stains bloomed like black flowers on the ceilings. Plaster hung in ragged strips. We found patient rooms, small barren cells with rusted bed frames bolted to the floor. Scratches covered the walls near the doors, deep, frantic gouges in the paint. Ben filmed it all, his voice lower now, less performative. This is intense. You can feel it, right? The sadness, the anger. He wasn't wrong. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken misery. It pressed down on us, making it hard to breathe. We avoided the areas that felt wrong, patches of corridor where the temperature plummeted suddenly, where the darkness seemed to swallow Ben's powerful light, where a low, almost subsonic hum vibrated in my bones. Ben felt it too. He stopped talking to the camera. We moved in tense silence, the only sounds our crunching footfalls and the ragged sound of our own breathing. We found the records room. Filing cabinets lay overturned, their contents, thousands of brittle, yellowed patient files, scattered like fallen leaves across the floor. Names, diagnoses, treatments, all obscured by time and mildew. Ben picked up one file, blowing dust off the cover. Subject 7, experimental lithium trials, severe catatonia, multiple restraint incidents. He dropped it like it burned him. This place was a nightmare factory. It was Ben who found the stairs down. A heavy metal door marked basement maintenance access only stood slightly ajar at the end of a service corridor on the ground floor. The air leaking from the crack was frigid and carried that sterile smell so strongly it stung my nostrils, cutting through the decay. It smelled clean, too clean. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the coppery tang of old blood. "Bingo!" Ben whispered, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a tense focus. "The surgical wing, this is it." He pushed the door open. A narrow, steep staircase descended into utter blackness. The cold intensified, raising goosebumps on my arms despite my jacket. The smell of antiseptic was overwhelming now, sharp and clinical, warring with the metallic blood scent and the deep, wet chill of the earth. Ben clicked on his largest lantern, its beam cutting a swath down the stairs. The concrete steps were stained dark in patches, not rust, something else. "Ben, I don't like this," I said, my voice tight. "This smells wrong, fresh. Let's go back, please." He turned, his face pale in the harsh light, eyes wide, not with fear, but with a kind of horrified fascination. "Dude, we have to see. This is why this place was shut down. This is the truth." He started down. I had no choice but to follow, my own light trembling on the steps below me. The stairs ended in a short, low-ceilinged corridor. Doors lined both sides. Pre-op, recovery, staff locker room, and at the end a pair of heavy swinging doors. the kind you see in old hospital dramas. They were slightly open. A faint, rhythmic beeping sound came from beyond them. Steady, mechanical, heart monitor. Ben stopped dead. The color drained completely from his face. He looked at me, his mouth working soundlessly. The GoPro light on his chest cast his shadow huge and distorted on the damp concrete wall. The beeping was unmistakable, deliberate, alive. It wasn't the erratic blip of a dead battery. It was the steady pulse of functioning equipment in a building abandoned for over 40 years. Ben, we need to go. Now. I grabbed his arm, my fingers digging in. He didn't resist, but he didn't move either. He was frozen, staring at those swinging doors. The beeping continued. Then a new sound, a wet, rhythmic squelching, slow, deliberate, like something heavy being worked on. Squelch, pause, squelch, pause, accompanied by a low, guttural humming, not a tune, just a monotone vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It resonated in my teeth. A shadow moved across the gap between the swinging doors. Tall, thin, impossibly still for a moment, then gliding silently sideways. It wasn't human-shaped. It was elongated, hunched, its outline blurred in the dim light leaking from the room beyond. It moved with unnatural smoothness. The squelching sound stopped. The beeping continued its relentless rhythm. The humming deepened, vibrating the floor beneath my boots. Ben finally moved. He didn't run. He lunged. Not away, but towards the doors, his lantern beam swinging wildly. "What the hell is that?" he shouted, his voice cracking, echoing in the confined space. "Show yourself!" "Ben, no!" I screamed, but he was already pushing through the heavy doors. I followed, driven by terror for him, my own light swinging wildly. The beam hit the center of the room. It was an operating room, or what was left of one. Ancient surgical lights hung from the ceiling, thick with dust and cobwebs. Cabinets lined the walls, their glass fronts shattered. But in the center, under the one set of lights that wasn't draped in shadows, stood an old, stained operating table. Strapped to it with thick leather restraints was Ben. His eyes were wide with terror, his mouth gagged with a wad of gauze. He was struggling weakly against the straps, muffled sobs escaping him. His GoPro lay on the floor nearby, its red recording light still blinking. Standing over him were 3 figures. They wore long, stained white coats that might have once been surgical gowns, now gray with grime and dark, wet patches. Their faces were obscured, not by masks, but by a thick swirling shadow that clung to their heads like living smoke, obscuring any features. Only dark, empty pits where eyes should have been seemed to absorb the light. One held a long, gleaming bone saw. Another held a tray of instruments, identical to the ones I'd found upstairs. Scalpels, retractors, clamps, all spotless, reflecting the single, flickering fluorescent light overhead that buzzed erratically. The 3rd figure stood at a wheeled cart holding an ancient analog heart monitor. Its screen showed a steady, rhythmic green line matching the beep, beep, beep that filled the room. A tube snaked from the machine to a needle embedded in Ben's arm. The figure with the bone saw turned its shadow face towards me as I stood frozen in the doorway. The squelching sound hadn't been machinery. It had been the saw, resting on the edge of the stainless steel instrument tray. The humming stopped. The beeping of the monitor seemed to grow louder, filling the silence. The shadow head tilted. It didn't have a mouth, but a sound emanated from it, a dry, clicking noise like stones grinding together deep in a well. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was the sound of something ancient and utterly devoid of warmth. The figure by the monitor reached out a hand. It wasn't human either. The fingers were too long, the knuckles protruding unnaturally, the skin gray and mottled like old meat. It pointed at me, not with a finger. It pointed with a large rusted hypodermic needle, its tip glinting wickedly in the flickering light. The beeping on the monitor hitched, spiked. Ben's muffled scream cut through the air as the shadow figures turned their collective, faceless attention fully towards me. The door I'd come through slammed shut with a final echoing bang that shook dust from the ceiling. The only light now was the flickering fluorescent above the operating table and the beams of our dropped lanterns casting long, dancing, monstrous shadows on the blood-stained walls. The bone saw scraped softly against the metal tray as the figure holding it took a slow, deliberate step towards the door where I stood trapped. The steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor was the only sound in the world, counting down the seconds until the light above the table would swing around and the cold, sterile air would fill with the sound of my own screams joining Ben's. The operating room wasn't abandoned. It was waiting, and I was next on the table. The buzzing of the light was the only sound in my head as the shadows began to move. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. We found children's toys scattered miles, deep in the woods with no houses nearby. The first one was easy to ignore. Just a plastic army jeep, half buried in mud beside the trail where a root had tripped me. Bright green, faded by years of sun, one wheel missing. I kicked it aside, muttering about littering hikers. My wife, Lena, didn't even glance back. She was hiking ahead, shoulders rigid, her boots crunching too loudly on the dry pine needles. It had been 3 months since Ellie died, 3 months of silence in a house that still smelled like baby shampoo and tears. This hike, the remote, unnamed stretch of Oregon wilderness marked only as Cedar Ridge on Lena's old paper map, was her idea. "Quiet," she'd whispered that morning, her voice raw from crying all night. "No memories out here?" I'd agreed, desperate to see her smile again, even if it meant carrying the weight of our grief into the backcountry. The second toy stopped us cold. We'd hiked 5 miles, off trail, following Lena's stubborn conviction that the real peace was deeper in. The forest had changed. The usual chatter of jays and squirrels vanished, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. Even the wind died. The air smelled wrong, damp wool and ozone, like the world after lightning strikes. That's when Lena froze. Her hand shot out, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "Ben!" Her voice was a thread. "Look!" Beneath a gnarled cedar tangled in ferns lay a doll, not a modern one, porcelain face cracked down one cheek, yarn hair matted with dirt. It wore a faded blue dress, one button eye missing, the other a slick black bead that seemed to follow us. Its tiny hand clutched a smooth river stone. No footprints led to it, no path. Just the doll, placed deliberately in the moss, as if waiting. "Probably a kid dropped it years ago," I said, forcing calm. My throat felt tight. Old trail. People get lost out here. Lena didn't blink. Her eyes were dry, red-rimmed hollows. "Ellie had a doll like this before the fever. She called it button. She reached for it. I caught her wrist. Don't. It's filthy. Could be toxic. She pulled away, her voice brittle. It's just a doll, Ben. Just a stupid doll. She knelt, brushing dirt from its face with her thumb. Then she froze. Her breath hitched. It's warm. I felt it then, too, a low thrum of heat radiating from the porcelain like a living thing, warm in the cold forest air. I grabbed her arm, yanking her back. Leave it, now! We hiked faster after that, not toward the ridge anymore, just away. But the woods had other plans. The trail markers vanished, the trees grew closer, their branches tangling overhead like grasping fingers, and the toys multiplied. A rusted tin robot, its paint peeled, lying in a patch of sunlight like an offering. A tiny chipped teacup filled with rainwater that smelled faintly of honey. A jump rope coiled neatly around a tree trunk, its handles smooth with use, each one impossibly clean, each one radiating that same unnatural warmth, each one placed with deliberate care in the most visible spots, on rocks, under fallen logs, balanced on stumps. No footprints, no signs of a campsite, no houses for 20 miles in any direction, just endless pines and these things. Lena stopped at a clearing. In the center, on a flat stone slick with dew, sat a toy train engine, red plastic, wheels gleaming. Steam curled from its stack, not mist, but a thin, sweet-smelling vapor that carried the scent of warm bread and wood smoke. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. Ellie's train, she whispered. She lost it at the park. The day before. Her voice broke. She took a step forward. Lena, no! I grabbed her shoulders. This isn't real. None of it's real. It's message with us, with you. She turned, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes weren't wet. They were wide, dry, burning. You don't feel it? That warmth? That's her, Ben. That's Ellie. She's here. She's trying to tell us something. I shook her gently. Ellie's gone. This is something else, something that knows how to hurt us. A sound cut through the silence. Not wind, not an animal. A child's laugh, high-pitched, giggly, coming from the trees to our left. Lena tore free from my grip and ran toward it. Ellie, she screamed, her voice raw. Baby, wait! I chased her, branches whipping my face, roots snagging my boots. The laugh came again, closer now. Then another sound beneath it, a wet, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy dragging through mud. I burst into a small clearing. Lena stood frozen 10 feet ahead, facing a thicket of blackberry brambles. On the ground before her lay a stuffed rabbit, gray fur matted with dark, sticky sap, one ear chewed off. Its button eyes were gone, replaced by 2 smooth obsidian stones that glowed faintly. And from the thicket, the laugh came again, closer, right behind Lena. I lunged, shoving her aside just as the brambles exploded, not with thorns, with roots. Thick black tendrils, slick with that same dark sap, lashed out like whips. One wrapped around Lena's ankle, yanking her off her feet. She screamed, clawing at the dirt. Another tendril snaked toward her face, ending not in a root tip, but in a cluster of tiny needle-like teeth. It hissed, a dry, papery sound, and lunged for her mouth. I swung my hiking pole. It connected with a sickening crack. Splintering the tendril, black sap sprayed like blood. The thing recoiled with a shriek that wasn't sound, but vibration, a deep thrum that shook the ground and made my teeth ache. Lena scrambled back, sobbing, her ankle bleeding where the root had gripped her. Run! I yelled, grabbing her arm. We crashed through the underbrush, blind with terror. The forest wasn't silent anymore. The thumping sound followed us, a heavy, wet drag, and beneath it, that child's laugh, now multiplied into a chorus of giggles and whispers that seemed to come from the trees themselves. "Lena! Ben! Ellie's waiting." We stumbled into a wider clearing. Moonlight, weak and pale, filtered through the canopy. In the center stood a ring of stones. Inside the ring, arranged in a perfect circle, were dozens of toys. The army jeep, the porcelain doll, the tin robot, the teacup, the train engine, the rabbit. Dozens more, blocks, marbles, a harmonica, a tiny pair of worn leather shoes, all glowing with that same faint internal warmth, all radiating that sweet, cloying scent of honey and warm bread. And in the very center of the circle, facing away from us, sat a small figure, a child, wearing a yellow sundress dotted with daisies. Her hair was dark, tangled. She was hunched over, rocking slightly, humming a tuneless lullaby. Lena made a broken sound. "Ellie?" She took a step forward, her voice trembling with hope. "Baby, is that you?" The figure stopped humming. Slowly, too slowly, it turned its head. The sundress was stained dark with sap. The hair wasn't tangled. It was woven with twigs and dead leaves. And the face, it wasn't Ellie's face. It was smooth, featureless bark. No eyes, no nose, just a wide, lipless mouth stretched into a rictus grin filled with tiny black thorns. The thing that wore Ellie's dress opened its thorn mouth. The child's laugh poured out, high and sharp, but beneath it a deeper voice scraped like roots, tearing stone. "Mama, come play. Papa's here too." Lena screamed, not in fear, but in grief-shattered recognition. She ran toward the circle of stones. "Ellie, I'm here. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry." "Lena, stop!" I grabbed her arm, but she was stronger than I expected, fueled by years of grief and a mother's desperate hope. She broke free and stumbled past the ring of stones. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the warmth vanished. The air turned glacial. The toys glowed dim to a sickly gray. The thorn-mouthed thing stood, its bark face splitting wider. The chorus of whispers became a roar. "Stay, play, belong." Roots burst from the earth, thick as pythons, coiling around Lena's legs, her waist, her throat. She didn't fight. She just stared at the thing wearing her daughter's dress, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'm here, baby," she whispered. "Mama's here." The roots pulled her down, not into the earth, into the circle, into the space between the toys. Her body stiffened, her skin grayed, hardening like old wood. Her eyes, wide with terror for one last second, clouded over, becoming smooth, dark stones. Her mouth opened in a silent scream and filled with thorns. Within seconds, she was gone. In her place stood another statue, another figure of bark and roots wearing Lena's jacket, her face a smooth oval with two dark stone eyes, smiling, waiting. The thorn-mouthed thing turned to me. Its grin widened, splitting the bark down its chest. It pointed a twig-like finger at the empty space beside Lena's statue. "Papa's turn?" I backed away, tripping over roots, my breath ragged sobs. The clearing walls of trees seemed to lean inward, blocking escape. The toy's warmth was gone, replaced by a deep, sucking cold that pulled at my bones. The whispers filled my head, not in ears, but in my blood. "Ellie misses you. She's cold. She is lonely. Stay, play, belong." I saw it then, the truth. These weren't toys left behind. They were lures, bait crafted from the deepest grief of those who wandered lost. The thing in the woods didn't hunt. It listened. It heard the hollow ache in a mother's heart, the raw guilt in a father's silence, and it shaped itself into the shape of that pain. It offered warmth. It offered hope. It offered a ghost of a child's laugh. And when you stepped into its circle, it didn't kill you. It kept you. It turned you into another statue, another lure, waiting to call the next grieving soul into the dark. I ran, not away from the clearing, but around it, skirting the ring of stones, heading for the thicket where I'd first shoved Lena aside. Roots lashed at my legs, snagging my pack, my sleeves. I tore free, stumbling into the brambles. Thorns ripped my arms, my face. I didn't feel them. I crashed through the undergrowth, the whispers rising to a shriek behind me, the child's laughter now laced with Lena's voice. "Ben! Don't leave me! Ellie needs her daddy!" I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out against the trunk of a massive cedar. Dawn was bleeding gray light through the canopy. Birdsong, real, ordinary birdsong, filled the air. I was back on the main trail. The ranger station was visible through the trees. They gave me blankets, hot coffee, asked about Lena. I told them she'd wandered off during a fight, that I'd searched all night. They found her boot near the ranger station, placed neatly on a rock. No footprints leading away, just the boot. They called off the search after 3 days. "Lost in the wilderness," the report said. "Presumed deceased." I moved cities, changed my name. I sleep with the lights on. I avoid parks, avoid toy stores, avoid the sound of children laughing. But the forest followed me. It's in the quiet moments, when the city noise fades at 3 a.m., when I stand in the kitchen pouring a glass of water. That's when I smell it. The faint, sweet scent of honey and warm bread. That's when I hear it. The dry, papery rustle of roots shifting under the floorboards. And the whisper, not in my ears, but in the space between heartbeats. "Papa, the circle's cold without you." Last Tuesday, I found a toy truck on my doorstep, bright green, one wheel missing, warm to the touch. Last night, I stood in my bathroom at 2 a.m., staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were shadowed, hollow. In the glass behind my shoulder, the darkness of the hallway wasn't empty. A small figure stood there, wearing a yellow sundress. Her face was smooth bark, but her stone eyes held Lena's warmth. She held out a hand, not twig-like, but small, child-sized, made of knotted roots. In her palm lay a single, smooth river stone. The whisper came, soft as fallen leaves. "Mama misses you. She's lonely. Come play." I didn't turn around. I closed my eyes. Tears burned tracks down my cheeks. The grief was a physical weight, a familiar ache that had lived in my chest since Ellie's funeral. The forest didn't just offer hope. It offered an end to the pain, an end to the silence, to hold my daughter again, to hold my wife, to be warm. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was steady. The warm truck sat on the kitchen table, its missing wheel gleaming in the streetlight. The scent of honey filled the air, the roots under the floorboards stilled, waiting. I opened the front door. The city street was empty, silent. But at the edge of the sidewalk, where the pavement met the overgrown lot next door, a single stone had been placed. Smooth, gray, warm. Beside it lay a tiny chipped teacup filled with rainwater that smelled like home. I stepped over the threshold. The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't look back. The streetlights flickered, then died. The city sounds vanished. Only the forest's silence remained, a deep, patient hum in the earth. The stone path ahead wasn't asphalt anymore. It was packed soil, soft under my bare feet. When had I kicked off my shoes? The houses melted away, replaced by towering pines. The air smelled of damp earth and ozone. Ahead, in a moonlit clearing, stood the ring of stones. Inside, dozens of figures waited. Lena stood near the center, her bark face serene, her stone eyes reflecting the moonlight. Beside her, the thing wearing Ellie's sundress held out a hand, not toward me, toward the empty space beside Lena. I walked forward. The roots didn't grab me. They rose from the earth like welcoming hands, brushing the dirt from my knees, my palms. They felt warm, alive. The whispers were soft now, a lullaby. Rest now, sleep now, belong. I knelt in the space beside Lena. Her root hand found mine, cold at first, then warming. The thorn-mouthed thing approached. It didn't smile. It simply opened its mouth wide, not to bite, to sing. A low, creaking hum that vibrated in my bones, in my blood, in the hollow where my heart used to be. The roots coiled around my legs, my waist, gentle as vines. My skin hardened, grayed. The pain was gone. The loneliness was gone. Only warmth remained, deep, earthy peace. My last human thought was of Ellie's laugh, not the forest's mimicry, the real one, the one that used to fill our kitchen on Saturday mornings. I smiled as the bark spread across my face, as my eyes clouded to stone, as the thorns grew between my teeth. The circle was full now, Papa, Mama, Ellie, waiting. This morning, a jogger found a single smooth river stone on the trailhead bench at Cedar Ridge, warm to the touch. Beside it lay a tiny chipped teacup filled with rainwater that smelled faintly of honey. He pocketed the stone, smiling. "Lucky charm," he told his girlfriend later. "Found it right where I needed it." She laughed, squeezing his hand. "We should have kids soon, don't you think?" He didn't feel the stone grow warm in his pocket. He didn't hear the dry, papery rustle beneath the trail's gravel. He didn't smell the scent of warm bread on the wind. But that night, as he drifted to sleep, he dreamed of a moonlit clearing, of a ring of stones, of 3 figures standing hand in hand, smiling with thorn-filled mouths. And in the empty space beside them, a 4th spot waited. The stone in his pocket pulsed once, warm, patient, hungry. The forest remembers every name. It remembers every ache. It waits in the quiet places between heartbeats, between footsteps, between breaths. It offers warmth to the cold. It offers laughter to the silent. It offers a child's voice in the dark. All you have to do is step into the circle. All you have to do is let go. The toys aren't left behind, they're invitations. And the circle is always hungry for one more to stand in the warm dark, one more to smile with thorns, one more to whisper, "Come play." I smile wider now, wider, until the bark cracks at the corners of my mouth, until the roots coil deep in my chest, until the only sound is the forest's breath, slow and deep, and the sweet, cloying scent of honey on the wind. The jogger will come. He'll bring his future daughter. She'll cry for her lost teddy bear. And I'll be waiting. I'll hold out a smooth stone. I'll hum a lullaby with my thorn mouth. It's almost time to play, and that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. We heard a church bell ring from the middle of the forest with no church around. The rain started an hour after we crossed the county line into Blackwater County. Not a summer shower, but a cold, relentless November downpour that turned the 2-lane blacktop into a slick, gray mirror reflecting the bruised sky. My old Honda sputtered, the check engine light blinking like a nervous heartbeat. Mara, in the passenger seat, traced patterns in the fogged-up window with her finger, her silence heavy, with the unspoken argument we'd been having since breakfast. About money, about her mother's illness, about the suffocating weight of a future that felt less like a path and more like a closing trap. We needed this trip. A weekend at her cousin's cabin in the Whisper Pines, she'd said. Deep woods, no cell service, just us and the trees. It sounded like salvation. Then the engine died, not with a bang, but a wet, shuddering cough that left us coasting to a stop on the shoulder, tires sinking into mud. The rain hammered the roof, the only sound in the vast, empty landscape. No houses, no lights, just skeletal trees clawing at the sky and the endless hiss of rain on wet asphalt. My phone was dead. The map in the glove compartment was a soggy pulp. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the dim glow of the emergency flashers and the deepening chill seeping through the car's thin metal skin. That's when we heard it. Faint at first, buried beneath the drumming rain, a single clear note, deep, resonant, the sound of a church bell. Mara sat up straighter. Do you hear that? I killed the flashes, plunging us into near darkness. The rain's roar filled the sudden silence. Then it came again, louder, closer. Bong. The tone was pure, ancient, vibrating in my chest like a struck tuning fork. It didn't echo. It filled the air, cutting through the storm's noise with impossible clarity. Church bell? I frowned, peering into the wall of rain and trees. Out here, there's nothing for miles. Mara was already unbuckling her seatbelt. It's coming from the woods, to the east. She pointed, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and that restless curiosity that always got her into trouble. We should check. Maybe it's a ranger station or a farm. We should stay in the car, I said, my hand tightening on the wheel. It's freezing. We're soaked. And that bell, it doesn't sound right. It sounds like help, she insisted, already opening her door. Cold rain lashed in. Come on, Ben. What's the alternative? Sit here and freeze? She was right. Reluctantly, I grabbed the emergency blanket from the trunk and followed her into the downpour. The bell rang again as we stumbled off the road, the sound seeming to pull us forward, guiding us through the curtain of rain and the dense wall of pines. The forest floor was a treacherous mush of mud and slick pine needles. The usual forest sounds were absent. No birds, no rustling squirrels, just the rain and that relentless resonant bong, bong, bong. After what felt like an hour but was probably 20 minutes, we broke through a thicket of blackberry brambles into a clearing. The bell stopped. The silence that followed was deeper, heavier than the storm. The rain still fell, but it sounded muffled, distant, as if the clearing existed in a bubble of its own quiet. In the center of the clearing stood a single ancient oak tree, its trunk thick as a house, branches stretching like gnarled arms against the gray sky, and hanging from the lowest, sturdiest branch, suspended by thick, rotten rope, was the bell. It was massive, cast iron, pitted with age and green with verdigris, easily the size of a washtub. No church, no steeple, just the bell, swaying gently in the damp air, though there was no wind. Rainwater pooled in its lip, spilling over in slow, deliberate drips that echoed like tiny chimes. No church, Mara breathed, her voice hushed with awe. "Just the bell." She took a step forward, drawn to it like iron to a magnet. "Mara, wait," I said, grabbing her arm. "This is wrong. Who puts a bell like that in the middle of nowhere, and why does it ring by itself?" She shook me off, her eyes fixed on the bell. "It's beautiful. Look at the craftsmanship." She reached out, her fingers hovering inches from the cold, wet metal. "It's still warm." I felt it too, a faint, unnatural warmth radiating from the iron, cutting through the chill. As her fingertips brushed the surface, the bell let out a soft, mournful not a ring, but a vibration that resonated up her arm, making her shiver. Her eyes fluttered closed. A small, serene smile touched her lips. "It's calling," she whispered. "It's calling them home." "Who, Mara? Who's it calling?" My voice was tight with panic. But she didn't answer. She just stood there, hand on the bell, her face tilted up like she was listening to something only she could hear. The rain stopped falling within the clearing. The air grew still, thick with the scent of wet earth and something else. Ozone, sharp and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. Then the whispers began, not from the trees, from the ground. Dry, papery rustles that seemed to rise from the mud at our feet. Layered voices, men and women and children, speaking in unison, a chorus of sighs that formed words. Come, rest, home. Mara's eyes snapped open. They weren't her eyes anymore. The warmth, the curiosity, was gone, replaced by a depthless, ancient calm. "They're waiting," she said, her voice layered with the whispers, dry as dead leaves skittering on stone. "The ones who heard the bell, they found peace." She turned to me, her hand still on the bell. "You hear it too, Ben, don't you? The quiet after the ringing, the peace." I backed away, my boots sinking into the mud. "Mara, snap out of it. This thing, it's not real peace. It's hungry." The bell hummed again, louder this time. The whispers surged, becoming a roar that filled the clearing, vibrating in my bones. "Stay, rest, belong." The mud around the oak tree's roots began to shift, not with worms or burrowing animals, with shapes, human shapes. Pale, skeletal hands, slick with black mud, broke the surface. Then arms, shoulders, faces, gaunt, eyeless, mouths open in silent welcome, pushed up from the earth. Dozens of them, men in tattered overalls, women in faded dresses, children clutching mud-caked toys, all rising from the ground like roots seeking the sun, all facing Mara, all reaching for her with those muddy hands. Mara didn't flinch. She stepped forward into their midst. "It's okay," she soothed, her voice calm, inhuman. "The bell calls everyone home, eventually, even the lonely ones." She looked back at me, her eyes holding a terrible, beautiful pity. "You're so very lonely, Ben. The bell knows. It's been ringing for you for a long time." The mud figures parted, forming a path toward the base of the oak. In the center, the earth was soft, yielding, like fresh-turned soil. A space waited, empty, for her. "Don't!" I screamed, lunging forward, but the mud sucked at my boots, holding me fast. "Mara, please, fight it." She smiled that serene, empty smile. "I'm not fighting anymore, Ben. The ringing stops here. The noise, it's gone." She knelt at the edge of the soft earth. The mud figures closed around her, not grabbing, but embracing. Their muddy hands smoothed her hair, brushed the rain from her cheeks. They lowered her gently onto her back in the soft earth. She didn't struggle. She just lay there, staring up at the gray sky, a look of profound relief on her face. The bell rang once, a single perfect bong that shook the rain from the leaves. The mud rose, not violently, gently, covering her legs, her waist, her chest. Only her face remained pale and calm, her eyes fixed on mine. "It's warm," she whispered, her voice fading, blending with the whispers in the earth. "So warm. No more noise, no more fear, just peace." The mud covered her mouth, her nose, her eyes. The bell fell silent. The mud figures sank back into the earth, leaving no trace. The clearing was empty. Just the ancient oak, the hanging bell, and me. The rain started falling again, cold and hard. I stumbled back through the woods, blind with tears, tripping over roots, not stopping, until I collapsed against my car on the road. The Honda's engine sputtered to life on the third try. I drove until the gas gauge hit empty at a dusty crossroads diner 50 miles away. I didn't tell the police about Mara. I said she'd wandered off into the woods during an argument, that I'd searched for hours in the storm. They found her boot near the road, placed neatly on a rock. No footprints leading away, just the boot. They called off the search after 3 days. "Lost in the wilderness," the report said. "Presumed deceased." I moved cities, changed my name. I sleep with the lights on. I avoid forests, avoid the sound of bells. But the clearing followed me. It's in the quiet moments, when the city noise fades at 3 a.m. When I stand in my kitchen, pouring a glass of water, I hear it. Faint. Beneath the hum of the refrigerator, a deep, resonant bong. Then another and another. The rain starts falling inside my apartment, cold and silent, pooling on the floorboards. The scent of wet earth and ozone fills the air. Last Tuesday, I found a single, smooth river stone on my pillow, cold, wet, smelling of deep earth. Last night, the power went out. The emergency lights in the hallway flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows. Shadows that didn't match the fire extinguisher or the mail slots. Shadows with too many limbs, too many heads. They reached for my door. The puddle on my floorboards began to shift, swirling into muddy handprints. The whisper came not under the door, but inside my head. In Mara's voice, calm and warm. "The bell's ringing, Ben. It's time to come home." I don't fight it anymore. The ache in my chest isn't pain, it's relief. The silence isn't empty. It's full of waiting, full of warm earth, full of Mara's serene smile. I unbolt the door. The hallway light is dead. Only the emergency glow remains, painting the muddy footprints leading away from my threshold. They're not just Mara's prints now. Men's boots, women's shoes, children's bare feet, all leading down the hall, toward the street, toward the forest. I step out, close my apartment door softly behind me. The puddle on the stairs puffs up around my feet, smelling of sagebrush and old rain. The bell rings again, closer now, clearer. Bong, bong, bong. The front door of the apartment building stands open. No one lives on this floor at night. The street is empty, silent. But down the road, on the edge of town where the city lights fade and the forest begins, a single, clear note rings out. Deep, resonant, calling. I walk toward it. My car is already parked on the shoulder, engine cold, but hood warm to the touch. Inside, the passenger seat is empty. The emergency blanket lies folded neatly on the floor. In the clearing, the ancient oak waits. The bell sways gently on its rotting rope, its iron warm in the cold air. At the base of the tree, the earth is soft, yielding. A space waits, empty, for me. Mara stands beside it, not muddy, not skeletal, whole, radiant. Her eyes are warm, human again, filled with love and peace. She holds out her hand. Her skin is warm, real. "The ringing stops here, Ben," she says, her voice clear, free of whispers. "No more noise, no more fear, just us, just peace." I take her hand. The mud rises gently, not cold but warm as fresh soil in spring. It covers my feet, my legs, my chest. Mara's face is the last thing I see. Her smile, her love, her peace. The bell rings one final time. A single, perfect bong that shakes the rain from the leaves and silences the world. The mud covers my eyes. The noise stops. The peace begins. Deep, endless, warm. The bell hangs silent in the clearing. The rain falls softly on the ancient oak. The earth breathes, and in the quiet dark, two figures rest, hand in hand. Finally, home. The forest doesn't keep its secrets. It keeps its people. The bell doesn't call the lost. It calls the weary, the lonely, the ones who've carried noise too long. It offers silence. It offers earth. It offers hands to hold in the warm dark. The next time you hear a bell ring in the middle of nowhere, don't follow it. Don't be curious. Run. Run until your lungs burn and your legs give out. Because the peace it offers isn't rest. It's belonging. And the forest is always hungry for one more to stand beneath the oak, hand in hand, in the warm, quiet dark. The bell is ringing right now. Can you hear it? Beneath the traffic, beneath the sirens, beneath the voices in your head. It's ringing for you. It knows how tired you are. It knows how lonely. It's been waiting. The mud is soft. The hands are ready. The peace is deep. Just listen. Bong. 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 Come home. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one.